In a town this big, who's there to write to anyway?
Everyone, and welcome back to Gotham TV Podcast, 0 Year, Episode 7. I'm Derek, I'm one of your hosts.
Hello, I'm John, I'm your other host.
And on this episode we're going to be talking about Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, the first in the trilogy of his Batman films. Really looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, no, me too. Really looking forward to talking about it. Also slightly apprehensive. It's a fairly big film. It kicked off 3 films that are made almost $3 billion at the box office, and I personally am a pretty huge fan of Nolan and the films that he's done.
Yeah, this pretty much kicked his career into high gear from doing Memento, which did well. Kind of has a lot of critical acclaim. Absolutely love it myself. And then he went on to direct probably the most well-known superhero franchise of all time.
Yeah, so a bit of trepidation here, trying to sort of scrutinise and review a Christopher Nolan film, but I've enjoyed it and looking forward to doing the review now. So I suppose with that, though, we should move on to the news.
Now for a City Watch news brief here on GCN.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of news coming out over the last couple of weeks since we recorded our Gotham trailer breakdown we did 2 weeks ago. We've got loads more news on Gotham, tons of it, and loads more news about the DC Connected Universe, which is the other piece we talk about. So I suppose to kick into the biggest news, I suppose, first, because the biggest news was a piece of cinematic news.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, in non-Gotham news, it's that Zack Snyder last week sort of tweeted that the coveralls or the tarpaulin needed to be removed from a suspicious vehicle in a photo that he released on Twitter. And lo and behold, the following day, we got a reveal of the new Batmobile for the Batman vs. Superman film, scheduled for 2016. But also, in it, there was Ben Affleck as Batman in the new Batsuit with the cowl and the cape and the suit, and looking rather chunky, I thought, and pretty buff.
Yeah, chunky's a word.
I think I read one comment somewhere which said someone's been eating all the pies, but I think that's a bit harsh. I think that's a bit harsh. Yeah. Pie eaters tend not to have pecs and a six-pack, but...
Yeah, well, I suppose that's definitely one good thing that we've seen in the photograph. There's no bat nipples, so it's not a return to the Joel Schumacher era Batman, which is really good. Very much to me, he looked like Frank Miller's Dark Knight from Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, kind of much bulkier, heavier set, kind of older, I suppose.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't read Dark Knight Returns, it's the graphic novel. It's about a retired Batman who gets back into the suit for one last time, so much older Batman. So in keeping with that, Ben Affleck is a much older actor. He's probably the oldest actor to play Batman since George Clooney, I think. So at this stage, he's probably going to be taking on the role of a mentor to Superman potentially in the next film. Batman versus Superman is what people are still calling it, so we'll continue with that.
And what did you think of the Batmobile in terms of its look?
Yeah,
I was
very cool.
Pretty excited by it,
Yeah, very cool. It's the wheels are huge, but it looks kind of like a mix of the Tim Burton Batmobile mixed with the Tumbler from the Chris Nolan films.
Yeah, it seems to have that chunkiness of the Tumbler, but also there is a sleekness to it, and certainly with the hood, that swept back hood, and the kind of the bat ear type spoiler at the back type thing, really looks like the Tim Burton's Batman. I thought just kind of that long front bonnet and the swept back hood leading into the spoiler at the back.
It's very
really
cool.
Evocative of the Tim Burton Batmobile.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody has a bit of feedback on the new suit, don't they? Including one of our listeners.
Yeah, no, Jer Lynch on Twitter.
Yeah.
Basically kind of spotted what looked like a face within the smoke at just behind Batman and the rear of the Batmobile. I kind of looked at it and thought, is it just the wheel? Is it just an illusion? I think there was suggestion that it looked like the Joker. Then when I started to look at it, I thought it looked a bit like the Scarecrow with the hat. I thought I could see a hat, but then I started to think, well, actually, is this is this what it's meant to do? Get us all talking, but certainly, we saw it as well after Joe Lynch had pointed it out on Twitter.
Once he pointed it out, I couldn't not see it, and then suddenly I started seeing stuff in my feed on Twitter, like from Starburst magazine, where somebody had pointed it out there. It's like Jer was the first person I'd seen say it, and then suddenly it kind of went over the internet that everybody was seeing a little face in the photo.
It's a good spot, Jer, definitely.
Absolutely. But are we reading too much into the photograph? I'm not too sure. I thought it looked like the wheels, but again,
we're bound to. We're excited about Batman versus Superman, and certainly if Batman potentially is sort of that older, grizzled, probably knock the bells and lights out of Superman.
There's a battle we'll be seeing in 2016. So we'll see.
We're pretty excited, and any kind of hints is really interesting to see.
Absolutely. So I suppose on to our Gotham news. We got loads of Gotham news this week as well. So this is probably, we think, the last real news we'll see till the summer. It's a big week for TV in America. It's a week called the Upfronts. What the Upfronts are is where each of the TV companies will bring all of their best programming for the autumn season or the fall season to one show, and they'll show off trailers and clips and
interviews,
and they'll bring in the timings of their TV shows so they can get advertisers to buy times during those periods in the autumn. So it allows them to plan and build money and budgets essentially for these programs. So pretty much every single program that's coming up, and we're interested and excited about, had either an announcement or the cast there or interviews, or they had a trailer.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, first of all, we got confirmation of the series pickup for Gotham, and its broadcast day, which will be Mondays at 8 p.m. on Fox.
Yeah.
Then we got a full cast photo, which was really nice. You had Harvey Bullock and Jim Gordon right in the front of that picture. You had the pairings then of Alfred and the young Bruce Wayne off to the right, and the Penguin and and Fish Mooney off to the left. That pairing, and then up above, sort of ready to kind of leap from the stairs into the alley, was the young Selena Kyle, and then behind them you had Edward Nygma and Ivy Pepper, who incidentally, what we can say here is that they have been confirmed as series regulars now for season 1, which I think is really good news. Certainly as a Edward Nygma Riddler fan, I'm really excited to see that. And then slightly further behind those two was a little tease, potentially, of the Joker in that picture.
Yeah, so when we were going through the photograph, the first thing we noticed was a tease for each of the characters, each of the big villains, and what they were going to become. So we see a Black Cat just below Selena Kyle. On one wall we see a Penguin poster, which signifies that Oswald Cobblepot is going to become the Penguin. That's quite difficult to say. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I always thought it was Cobblepot when I was much younger. I always said Cobblepot, and it's Cobblepot.
Yeah, it's only Tim Burton that solidified it for us.
Yeah, I wasn't hearing the P's or the B's, but and then on the other side there was the question mark for the Riddler.
Yeah,
you had Ivy growing up the walls of the alleyway as well. You had
just above
Ivy Pepper. Yeah, then you had the spotlight shining in the background in the night sky, presumably with a bat signal on one side.
Yeah, and just beside that, which John spotted and I didn't, was playing cards. Essentially, a set of playing cards.
A set of neon, it's like a club sign with a set of neon sort of playing cards, calling cards, and then you kind of looked at that and you just wondered whether that was the Joker.
Yeah, there's
a tease for the Joker, and certainly he is being teased to everyone who's following this series quite heavily, and by the Helmers as well.
Yeah, in an interview with Bruno Heller and Danny Cannon, there's kind of a presentation they did for the upfronts, which included some footage of the TV show, some that we hadn't seen before, some that we talked about in our last episode. Go back to episode 6 and listen through our kind of breakdown of that. But they're very much trying to sell this show. Obviously, this is the perfect time to sell it to advertisers, so they're teasing a lot of things out. And so some of the things they teased in there was Danny Cannon said, "You don't want to miss an episode of this show because it might be the episode where we introduce the Joker." Additionally, he says some other stuff, I think. Yeah.
So that we may show you why the Scarecrow becomes the Scarecrow. Obviously, that's Dr. Jonathan Crane, who's going to feature heavily sort of later on in our review of Batman Begins.
Absolutely.
So there was a lot of that. I think as well, we got confirmation that Victoria Cartagena was going to be a season regular as well as Renée Montoya, along with her partner, at least within the Gotham Central series that we've been covering, the Anthony Stewart Jones as Crispus Allen. So that's really, really interesting. We're wondering whether they're going to be a good substantive sort of second detective partnership in the GCPD, that you get to see them evolve and develop much more, as well as the main detective protagonists of Harvey Bullock and Jim Gordon.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping with the fact that the show is named Gotham, that they're going to try and concentrate on a lot of characters over the course of the season, because it, having to have Jim Gordon be at the center of every single story, every episode, could kind of lead it into some short storylines or stuff that can't go everywhere. Whereas if you bring in Montoya and Allen, it gives you another pairing in the GCPD to kind of look around the city and see what's going on.
Yeah, and I think our final bit of actual Gotham TV news is the confirmation of at least 16 episodes. I think we had previously talked about there being 13 episodes, but I think there's confirmation at least of 16 episodes now, with possibly more episodes, maybe 21, 22 episodes for Gotham.
Yeah, the average season, like a show like Arrow or Flash or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that kind of thing. The average show in the States is about 22 episodes. So the confirmation that we'll have at least 16 episodes in the season, and probably 22, brings it more in line with other shows, I suppose. A short season of a show would be about 8 episodes, would be closer to a UK TV show.
Yeah, I mean, UK, you'd often get episodes of maybe 6 to 8.
And Fox, I suppose, are known for doing some kind of shorter seasons, like 13 episodes or 16 episodes. But, having something on Fox, if it's popular and doing well, that they can expand to 22 episodes over the season, I think is good for them.
In addition to the Fox TV Upfront presentations as well, there was an interview in Entertainment Weekly. James Hibbard interviewed Bruno Heller, the showrunner. And it was a very interesting interview about their research, about where the season 1 had been mapped in its entirety, that he was likening it to Rome and sort of Gotham to Rome and that kind of mythology and the mythos there. And he also made several points about it being sort of Nolan-esque in terms of it being a heightened universe, that the look and feel would be moody, tonally dark and gritty. But he also made some fairly bold claims that it was going to be visually, that Gotham would surpass the Batman movies, and that it would be just, if not more, visually stunning than the Batman movies, and that whilst they were visually stunning, he didn't personally, I think, feel that they were visually pleasurable. And it was quite bold statements to make. It's only got a number of different news outlets talking about it. I suppose that's what a show wants at this stage, certainly when they've just provided an official trailer, an extended official trailer, which has been generally well received. So,
yeah, if you're trying to promote a show in May that's going to be coming out in either October or November of the same year, you've got 5 months to basically get people continually talking about your show. You make a bold statement like, our show is going to be visually better than a $200 million movie that made $1 billion when at the cinema. you make those kind of claims and people are going to remember them. I can see the review of the first episode taking that line and going, well, is it better than Batman Begins, or is it better than the Dark Knight trilogy? You know, it's a bold statement to make and kind of setting himself up a little bit.
They're setting themselves, either they're setting themselves a really high standard that they're aiming for, and if they achieve that or even get considerably close to it for a TV budget, then excellent. That's where you want to aim. You want to aim for that type of quality and both sort of critical and commercial reception.
Yeah.
Because then they're doing their job with regards to sort of the advertising rights for the show, and hopefully we then get season 2.
Yeah. As we mentioned on our trailer breakdown episode, our last episode, there was 8 million people watching the 24 show where it was broadcast. That 8 million people watching that. There's been 6 million views of the trailer on YouTube, and generally really positive on the look and feel of the show. So Bruno Heller's claims may be quite big claims, but you know, right now it's looking pretty good.
Absolutely, and I think as well it will come back to what we discuss later in the review. You know, there are certain criticisms of Nolan as a director in terms of his type and of style and his look and image. That maybe, you know, that's what he's feeding into, that he wants to associate with those movies, but not necessarily exactly with the style.
Yeah.
So it will be, certainly we'll touch on those things later on in the review about that style, maybe.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of trailers, we've got a bunch this week of trailers.
So many.
I think that's pretty much how I spent most of my week, was watching stuff from upfronts for different networks. Yeah.
It was a crazy week. It was kind of after the extended Gotham trailer, which, I mean, we were just like, that was awesome. Just exactly what we were hoping for.
Yeah.
Really good. And obviously you can listen to our podcast as to how we felt about it. Then came another DC property in Constantine that gave its trailer. And for me, I'm certainly pretty excited by Constantine. I mean, I read a number of the Hellblazer comics and the series that are going to form the basis of this show. I love the fact that he's got his blonde hair back. He's got his khaki trench coat, and he's also got he's a British accent. It's not a Scouse accent now.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak like this, but
Kind of identify with Constantine.
I do a bit, yeah. But he's certainly, it looks good. There's certainly a lot of talent behind that TV show, at least for the pilot, at least hopefully for season 1.
Yeah.
With Neil Marshall, again David S. Goyer, who wrote and provided the story for Batman Begins that we were reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a huge amount of talent there.
And if you want to hear a bit more complete breakdown of the trailer, John wrote a really good article for theeffect.net, which he put up this week. It's really good. I have to give you a bit of praise for that.
Thank you.
It's really good. Really looking forward to it. Must say the humour comes out very, very well in the Constantine trailer, I must say. But yeah.
And so also with the Constantine trailer, we also found out that it will be on Fridays at 10 p.m. And that is going to follow Grimm. So that's interesting, two kind of supernatural type TV shows. Mm-hmm. Along with, as well, Supernatural as a TV series. So it's kind of interesting, this move towards sort of the dark arts and the sort of magic and ghouls and ghosts and demons and heaven and hell and purgatory.
And DC are getting there first, aren't they? Right.
Well, I'm excited by it, but I'm hoping that this is because they realise that Doctor Strange is on his way and that the Sorcerer Supreme will... Oh, I wouldn't mind if he hooked up with John Constantine and they went round blazing a trail.
The first DC Marvel crossover movie. I love it. Love it.
It could be called Doctor Strangelove.
That would be pretty strange, love, actually. So the other big trailer, I know that a bunch of our listeners are pretty excited about it. Flash trailer came out this week. It'll be shown on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Arrow's shown on Wednesday. This is made by the same creators on the CW network. So very similar style to Arrow, but there seems to be a lot more budget behind this show. I can definitely say that. The trailer showed, I think, most of the series.
It was a long trailer, 5 minutes or something.
Yeah, but it didn't just look like the pilot. It looked like they were showing off everything that happens in the season. So,
although remember, I watched the wrong trailer. I watched the teaser trailer. Essentially, Derek kind of called me up and said, "Look, the Flash." Trailers out. I was away with work in Finland, and it was I went on, checked it on YouTube, and it was the teaser trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of went back to Derek and said, "It's really short. It's like compared to what Gotham and Constantine had put out, I thought it's really different, and I didn't know whether it worked." But I had actually just watched the wrong trailer. And yeah.
Luckily it wasn't the 90s TV show that you watched.
No, exactly. It was a long trailer.
Yeah.
Some pretty good...
It's pretty good special effects for a trailer as well.
Yeah.
Because what I was thinking was, they obviously put a lot of planning behind it by doing a crossover with Flash within the Arrow series. They obviously know that this is one of their big cash cows. If they get Arrow and Flash on the same network, showing every week, you can do crossovers between the two a lot. You've already shown in the trailer that Arrow's going to be in the first episode of Flash. Yeah,
there's huge potential there, and if they get it right, it will be pretty good, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's it, I think, for the news.
There's lots there. But
yeah, definitely. So I think that brings us on to our feedback.
Dr. Crane isn't here right now. But if you'd like to make an appointment...
One of the things I think we just need to just talk about on the feedback is with regards to the competition, because in earlier podcasts we had talked about a competition that we're running for a signed Matthew J. Fletcher print of a Penguin poster, and we just want to clarify that this is open to anyone, anywhere. International delivery applies, and we will send it anywhere to anyone. So please, there's no restriction on who can enter into this competition.
Yeah, it could be on Krypton or Oa. You could be sending in your feedback from there. We'll see if we can find someone to post back to.
Aquaman, it might get a bit soggy.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poster we've talked about a few times. All the details are up on the website of what you need to do. It's simply to provide us with some feedback that we talk about on the show, and the one who provides the best feedback will win the poster.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've got a fair amount. First of all, I think we're putting our own names into the hat by providing feedback on our own podcasts. And by that, I mean episode 6 of our podcast, where we broke down the trailer that had been released during the Fox upfronts.
Mm-hmm.
And we had spotted John Doman from The Wire, and we had initially indicated that he looked like Commissioner Loeb.
Yeah, I think we probably made that assumption because he was in The Wire and played a policeman. And, you just make that assumption automatically. And the minute it was in my head, it didn't change for the whole podcast. And then when we did our review, it didn't change.
No. And then we kind of looked back over it, and we started to see that potentially he could be a Carmine Falcone type person, or a mafia mob boss.
Or Carmine Falcone. That'd be cool to bring into the show, actually. Yeah,
it'd be brilliant, because we see him very much involved in the sort of that meat processing factory where there's all the sort of tarpaulin sheets down, and he's there behind these guys coming in firing guns, which was released as part of the Fox Upfront interview with Bruno Heller and all that.
Yeah.
Now, it's only a very short glimpse, and we think it's him, but we basically think that maybe, he isn't the commissioner. Maybe he's more of a criminal within the show.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he could still be the commissioner. He could still be Commissioner Loeb. Because if you look back at our Batman Year 1 review, it's very much that Commissioner Loeb is in the pockets of the mafia and is doing their dirty work. Maybe, from what we see, that's getting your hands a bit too dirty for a commissioner of the police force. And so maybe it is more towards being Carmine Falcone or some other mob boss or mafia boss within Gotham.
Yeah.
But we just thought we'd share that with you, because it certainly, I think we initially just went, oh, it's Commissioner Loeb. But he isn't on IMDb at the moment. There's no credit of him on the IMDb page for Gotham TV series.
Yeah, and considering the actor John Doman was instantly recognised by pretty much every site out there as to who the actor was, they picked up the fact of who the actor was, put up images of him, little snippets of him from the trailer, and we still don't have confirmation on IMDb as to what character he plays. I think there's a reason behind that. I think they're trying to keep a bit of a bit of a shade over the top of who he is.
Yeah, and a bit of mystery and suspense.
Yeah, mystery's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we received some Twitter feedback from Doug Green. And he kind of went, at Gotham TV Podcast, do you think the pilot will be 2 hours? There's lots of stuff in that extended trailer for a 1 hour pilot.
Yeah.
He kind of goes on to, we had a bit of to and fro, a bit of back and forth, and he kind of said, bringing Gordon to Gotham, there's lots of intros, there's a lot of, people there like Edward Nygma, Ivy Pepper, the Penguin, Fish Mooney, and so on. Mm-hmm. There's the death of the Waynes. It seems, he says, that it's a lot for the 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think for a 13 episode season, that certainly it would be really nice to give the space to breathe to have a 2 hour pilot.
Yeah.
That would be a lot. To cram it all into one, it would be a lot. But I think as we're learning that it is maybe at least a minimum of 16 episodes, and maybe even 22, that allows things to breathe over an even longer kind of gestation period. And so I don't necessarily think that they will bring all that from the trailer into just the first episode, even though I would think a lot of it has been taken from that filming. I wonder whether they can start to cut it around with the new footage that they have.
Yeah, I have a different opinion, which is probably why we're bringing it up. My feeling is that this is all from the pilot. This is all shot for the pilot. I do feel that everything that's shot is going to be in the pilot. I think it's going to be 60 minutes. I don't think there's no announcement anyway yet that it's going to be 2 hours. 2 hour pilot would be great, but what I do think is they're not going to answer every question that's posed by the trailer in that pilot. Things like bringing in Edward Nygma and bringing in Poison Ivy. I think I mentioned last week that those two pieces could be the only pieces we see of those characters. It could be just an introduction saying, and this is Edward Nygma, a member of our team at the GCPD. He smiles, and that's the only scene. It could be that Ivy Pepper is shown for a second at the end of the episode, but they're definitely not going to explore every bit of her character or every bit of his character.
Absolutely. I think there's, on that we're agreed. I think that it's going to be 1 hour, and that it depends ultimately on the story being told. As you said in the last episode of the podcast, that shot of Ivy Pepper, it looked like the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
So it is literally kind of, someone walks in on a girl with an ivy plant and tending it, and that sets up the fact that she will be in the season.
Yeah, it could be even like a tag, like the ones they do in the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that kind of.
Or, as you say, Edward Nygma is brought on board as forensics to investigate the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and that it's simply that. I think what we'll get to later in our review is that, you can introduce a lot into a show or a film, but how you bring it in, how cleverly you do that, means to say whether you get the tag that, unfortunately, say the Spider-Man films, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 has gotten, which is, there were too many bad guys brought in, or what Spider-Man 3 suffered the same fate, that there was a heavy criticism that there were too many bad guys. But I think you can have a lot of bad guys introduced. It's how they're introduced and in what context in the overall story of that episode and across the season.
And as we know, the intention of it is you're going to be advertising this really heavily during summer, really heavily coming up to it. You're going to get the most eyes that you get on a TV show in its pilot. I think a lot of shows, a big show will start out with 10,000 viewers. A lot more than that. A big show will start out with 10 million viewers on its first episode, and will plummet to about 5 or 6 million viewers by the second episode. People want to have eyes on it. If you share all the things that you're looking to explore in the series in your first episode, it will hopefully allow people to stay on board for a couple more weeks and get them interested in the show.
Yeah, ultimately, the one thing you don't want to have is the situation where essentially you blow everything in the first episode, and then you just gradually kind of go trail off. A lot of the thing about TV shows is managing expectation and what you're expecting from week in, week out. And I think, you need a big upfront first episode, but at the same time, you have to kind of manage that. You have to deliver every week, absolutely.
Yeah. But if you're going from having your audience after your first episode, which is generally what happens on big TV shows in the States. You have to make sure that you have some kind of hook to bring them back the next week. And the biggest thing you can do is go, look, here's our storyline for this week. Didn't you enjoy that? And look at all the things you're going to see for the rest of the season.
There is a lot there in that trailer. And 2 hours help that breathe. But, that Gordon's arrival could ultimately be an episode. That the death of the Waynes is an episode. And probably you can build that mystery around that. We kind of agreed there with Doug.
Yeah, that's what he was saying to us, yeah. So, yeah, thanks very much for that, Doug. I think you're the first to enter our hat for our competition, because it's got us arguing on air and we haven't cut it, so yeah.
Well, that's true, actually. And just to say as well, we obviously aren't entering ourselves with our feedback on Commissioner Loeb. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, we're only messing. I think we got a bit more Twitter feedback as well.
Yeah, we also then had some Twitter feedback from Joey Smith, and he's basically wondering whether the show and this aspect and element of the DC universe, whether it will connect to Man of Steel. And we've kind of raised this before, that maybe, this would link into some of the other connected DC universe. I mean, I think we can guarantee now that it wouldn't be connecting in with Arrow or Flash.
Yeah.
But whether it would connect in at least to the Superman versus Batman movie, because of obviously the direct link with Batman in there. But as one of our listeners previously had said, that it connects in the sense that it provides the build-up to what goes on in Superman versus Batman. It adds to the mythos or to the timelines of this universe, which may ultimately inform aspects of those characters on the big screen.
Yeah.
But that in terms of direct links, that might be pushing it, I think, because it's a completely different timeline. It's further back in the timeline.
Exactly.
Whereas the details of Superman, Batman aren't that well known at the moment. But certainly judging by the image, if that is sort of Frank Miller-esque Dark Knight Returns type look, that beefier, older Batman, then this may be ultimately, in terms of time, is much further ahead on the timeline. I don't think the connection...
Yeah, I was thinking that something like Man of Steel would probably be, if this was to connect into those films, Man of Steel would have to be about 15 years after Gotham, and then obviously Batman versus Superman will be another couple of years after that, so you're probably thinking quite a considerable gap between even the end of Gotham and the start of...
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't see, say, Clark coming into the show in any way.
Yeah. And patting little Bruce on the head.
Yeah. Kind of field trip to Gotham from Metropolis.
And speaking of our listener who talked about the possible connection between Gotham and the DC cinematic universe, Ben Avery sent in a bit more feedback. Ben Avery from Welcome to Level 7 Podcast. We'd mentioned on Twitter that we were really excited once we got confirmation that the show's happening, because what it means for us, when it was confirmed that it was going to be 16 episodes, it means that we're going to have a full podcast. We're not going to be covering a pilot that just disappears into nothingness, which is great. So Ben's come back to us saying that he's really excited as well, because it means he can follow our podcast with the show, which is great. And then gave us some feedback about the trailer itself. So for the trailer, he told us it looks fantastic. This is the good news for him. The imagery of Bruce and his parents is haunting, and that frame of film belongs in the gallery of classic images of that moment. It's perfect and says everything. I think we talked about that. The scream of David Massus is perfect in that scene. Back to Ben. In some ways, this truly is year one, more so than Miller's. It's been said before, but this idea of following Bruce as a kid is excellent. They seem to have picked the perfect Jim Gordon to hang the show on. I think we agree.
Definitely.
Ben McKenzie looks brilliant in the part.
He looks really, really good.
Yeah. The look and style of the show looks spot on, says Ben. It will be difficult to keep that excellence up from week to week, and I think we've spoken about that on the show tonight, that they've made the claim they're going to keep that up. Now, on to the bad from Ben. So Ben says, so many characters. I'm worried we could end up with the opposite problem of the beginning of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In Agents, we were so excited for the potential to pull from the huge catalogue of Marvel characters, but instead we got a lot of references to the movies. Minor disappointment, but eventually we got over it. Here we have almost all the villains from the Burton and Schumacher movies in one 2-minute ad, essentially, 2-minute commercial. Joker excluded, of course, and Mr. Freeze, so there was no bad cold puns in that particular piece. So what Ben says is, I just hope, instead of early Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. style of making us dig for the Easter eggs, that Gotham doesn't just drop Easter eggs in our lap, like, this is Dr. Victor Von Freeze, and he'll be helping us with this crime, or they can hear you all the way to Metropolis, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a really good point. And then Ben goes on to say, or here's Bruce Wayne meeting villains from his future, but done in such a way that they won't recognize each other. And again, that's something that would really concern me if they kept bringing these villains up, meeting Bruce Wayne, and then for some reason he forgets who they are in the future. Here's Ben's expectations from the trailer. War is coming. He gets the implication that there's a power vacuum and Fish Mooney is one side of the war. The Waynes are casualties of that war. This is the foundation of the show. We could be getting Crime of the Week stories, like one about a creepy plant girl. Final thought, just realised that we're going to be watching a show about a hero, Gordon, taking a stand against a tidal wave of evil that is just going to continue to grow as he fights against it until Batman arrives. Our main character is fighting a losing battle. There's a bit of hopelessness to Gordon's situation. Fighting a losing battle can be inspiring, though. I'm interested in the drama potential.
For me, Ben raises some really interesting points here. And I think something that Ben McKenzie had said in an interview, that it is this idea that the show will take a look at how Gotham got to a situation where it needed to have a guy in a cape and a cowl. Yeah. And so I think Ben is right. This idea of a losing battle against crime, that the web of corruption becomes too great and starts impacting on people from the everyday, not just the police department. Again, he's right. You need to introduce people for a reason. Just name dropping of Mr. Freeze, or having young Bruce Wayne meets Edward Nygma in a coffee shop, bump into one another by accident, and those kind of glancing moments. That shouldn't be done very often, if at all, maybe once or twice. Yeah. Certainly, because you're going to have that anyway with Jim Gordon. We've seen that in the trailer. And maybe you could explore that better with some character of meaning, where later on, when Batman is around, you have like Selina Kyle or Catwoman and Batman. It would be, as I think we mentioned in our first ever show, it would be useful and interesting to see this kind of development of these two characters, maybe as young adolescents, as teenagers. Certainly from the trailer, we see that Selina Kyle is at the home of Bruce Wayne, because she sees a car driving down the road from Wayne Manor, and she's looking up at Wayne Manor. So there could be this possibility that they meet. I don't think shouldn't be, but it needs to be kept meaningful and infrequent, because otherwise just this name dropping or people bumping into one another, that's a bit messy.
I agree, and the whole point of Gotham, the simple point of it is that all these characters, the bad guys, the good guys, they're all Gothamites. They're not people that are shipped in from outside. That's the point, While the comic books can introduce them walking in fully formed onto the page of a comic book, the TV show needs to go right where we're taking our Gotham starting from this time, starting when there's a young Edward Nygma, there's a young Selina Kyle, a much younger Selina Kyle, I suppose, a young Oswald Cobblepot, and they're going to eventually become the villains that you see in the comic book. That means you could have 10 years worth of stuff to play with that character and how they develop into these things. That's the interesting and enjoyable potential for me. I don't want to see Harley Quinn walking on fully formed. I want to see Harleen Quinzel, the psychiatrist who's dealing with people in Arkham Asylum or in Blackgate Prison, becoming Harley Quinn over many episodes. I want to see that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that would tie in with Barbara Keane as well, who is a medic. So maybe there is some potential there for them to meet, and certainly you can see the potential for that. And I think Ben is right. I think there's a lot of worries that there were all these names flashing up at the end of the trailer of before the Riddler, before the Catwoman, before Poison Ivy, and so on. And I think if they are spread out over the season, or if not between seasons, if it gets a season 2, I think it's how those stories are told. And Absolutely. If they're done in a really interesting and clever way, any piece of work can stand up to having a lot of interest and intrigue from different characters and different plot points, progressing it through. You could say you only have to look at Game of Thrones moving around an entire world to see that all these different things can be hooked up, linked together in a good way and a successful way. And there's no reason why this show can't do it. Certainly if they've got that vision and aim.
Absolutely. So thanks, Ben, for that feedback. It's really good. I think Ben goes into the hat as well for that. That's been a good bit
Certainly.
of chat there. Thank you very much, guys.
And that's really, I think, the end to the feedback that we received. It's just to say we got 2 reviews and a comment. We received a review on iTunes USA from Whispering Loon, and thanked us for it being an interesting and informative podcast of this up-and-coming TV series, Gotham, saying we kind of, thank you, know our Batman history, and we try and integrate that analysis into what we think about the show and for the series, as well as just sort of reviewing those particular pieces of work like Gotham Central and Batman Year One. So thank you to the Whispering Loon. Love the name as well. That's really, really good name.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And it's always good getting iTunes reviews. We've mentioned it before. It allows people to find our podcast if you leave an iTunes review. If you leave it in your own country, that's great. You know, most people have to. But if you want to just pop us on an email after you've left the review, you can get us at gothamtvpodcast@gmail.com. Just pop us on an email just telling us what country you've left the review in, because we're based in Ireland, as you know, and we have to kind of search around every country just to find these reviews sometimes. So it takes a little bit of time to get it through to us, but we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you. And then we received a comment on our website from Irene Ryan. She goes, "Hi guys, I just wanted to say I loved episodes 4 and 5 with the 20 or so comics review. Really brought them to life. Got the eyes for the detail and lots of things that she wouldn't have thought of or she didn't notice. She's really, she says she's hooked. She's loving it. She loved the story arc of Marcus Driver and Mr. Freeze and the abuse of Ray Montoya, which I mean are excellent threads
Really
of
threads,
Gotham Central.
Yeah.
She kind of was saying she thinks that we are sounding even better on the second and third listen. Maybe that's because my cold has gone. Remember, I had that dreadful cold at one stage.
That's true.
So again, thanks Irene for that comment that you left on the website with regards to episodes 4 and 5 with the Gotham Central reviews. So if you only just coming to us now, check those out, see what you think, provide some reviews. We hope we can provide some interesting new material for you to read or to listen to. I mean, certainly, I think for ourselves, Gotham Central came about because we saw a picture by Ben McKenzie on his Twitter feed, and we had both never read them, and I think we're finding them to be a really good comic series. And I mean, at the moment, we've got that little break from them. We moving into some of the films, so we're doing Batman Begins and also then the rest of the Dark Knight trilogy. We can't wait to get back to looking at the rest of those of the comic series.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's a perfect point really to move on to our review of Batman Begins.
Batman Begins.
Looking forward to it.
Took quite a fall, didn't we, Master Bruce?
And why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up.
Batman Begins came out in 2005. This was 8 years after the critical failure of Batman and Robin, which starred George Clooney and his bat nipples, and directed by Joel Schumacher. I think
what nipples they were.
Yeah, I think everybody has to agree that is a movie that has to be seen to be believed. Apparently written by a committee.
8-year-olds.
Yeah, written by the producers brought in their 8-year-old kids to tell them what they wanted in a Bat movie.
Goldfish were involved, I think.
I think it was, if you watch it, definitely.
Death by Neon.
Absolutely. At that stage, no one really expected a big screen return for the Bat. It was doing quite well in animated form for a while, and obviously the comics generally were doing quite well, but they handed the reins of the franchise over to David S. Goyer, who at the time, I remember reading, comic book movie magazines. He was connected with every single superhero at the time. He wrote Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., starring David Hasselhoff, of all people.
That classic version of Nick Fury.
The classic aversion of Nick Fury, or perversion of Nick Fury, whatever way you want to say it. He also wrote Blade 1, 2, and 3. Blade was the first Marvel superhero.
The big one.
Yeah, people always credit Spider-Man as being the kind of kickstarter of this generation of superhero movies. but really it was Blade.
It was Blade, definitely.
Pretty adult superhero film, pretty dark superhero film.
Contained Bros.
Contained one of the members of Bros, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some elements of that you go, okay, I can kind of see where this guy was coming from, but you wouldn't have handed over the reins to Batman to him. You know, now we talk about people like Zack Snyder taking on Batman and being a bit worried about it. At the time, you give it to David S. Goyer and you go, okay, well, what the heck's he going to do with it, you know? But then they brought on Chris Nolan, who, again, best known at the time for Memento, which was a fantastic film, but really had played in
Very
small
indie,
circuits. Yeah.
very small budget, and he had and also Insomnia,
Yeah.
which he was a remake of a Scandinavian film, all about obviously a murder mystery set in
Place that
sort of
never
the
sleeps.
Arctic and the night of the living sun. I think rather than Scandinavia, you're looking at sort of Arctic Canada, sort of Alaska.
Yeah.
A film I really enjoyed, but again, you suddenly went from this remake of of quite an unknown property to a huge property.
Yeah.
And a remake of a huge property. Suddenly an awful lot of expectation as to how this will pan out, and an awful lot of responsibility for Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, but he definitely worked very closely with Goyer to create a vision or craft a vision for this series and this new franchise, I suppose. I think we'll go through it during our review, but there's definitely points that I feel that Nolan added something that Goyer probably wouldn't have come up with at all, and there's definitely points that Goyer added characters from the DC universe that Nolan probably wouldn't have known at all. So John, do you want to give us a bit of a synopsis for what we're going to be reviewing?
Starring Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne and Batman, Batman Begins charts the origins of the Batman in Gotham City. Following the tragic murder of his parents Thomas and Martha Wayne, Bruce goes on an exploration to find justice or maybe vengeance for his parents' murder. In a steadily deteriorating Gotham City, an organised menace is using the criminal underworld and the corrupt for their plan. Little do they know that a new hero has been born from the ashes of tragedy.
Cool.
And so, from here on in, there will be spoilers. So obviously, if you haven't watched Batman Begins, we would definitely recommend watching it. But if you haven't, there will be spoilers from here on in. The podcast is going to follow a rough 3 acts of this film.
Mm-hmm.
The first act is essentially what we're calling the setup of Batman. This is why ultimately Bruce Wayne becomes the Batman. We move on to Act 2, where it's essentially becoming Batman, and this is the creation of the idea and the concept, the creation of the costume, and ultimately this team around Batman within Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
And finally then to Act 3, and this is the first steps of the Batman introduced to the wider city of Gotham, and ultimately the resolution of the story that is unfolding behind these 3 principal acts of Batman and his beginning. Batman Begins.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point to note was that when David Goyer was asked to do this, he was asked to kind of set it up so it led directly into Tim Burton's Batman. So if it was a failure, another commercial failure for Warner Brothers, they could essentially say, well, go and look at our brilliant Batman film by Tim Burton, which is quite interesting when you think about the structure of the film. I think they probably didn't expect as much out of it as we eventually got, especially leading into a new trilogy by Christopher Nolan.
So we have the opening of the film where you have all these swirling bats. It's very reminiscent of Batman Year One, and it becomes a thematic thread throughout the whole movie, actually, in terms of these bats and their association, obviously, with Bruce Wayne and ultimately becoming the Batman. But the film starts with these swirling around, creating the new Batman film. There are no titles at all. And this is a theme, again, across all the films of the Nolan's trilogy, this bat motif. And it essentially moves then into this full opening sequence of Act 1, where you have these flashbacks of Bruce Wayne as a young kid, growing up, heading off to university, on this exploration, ultimately to him returning back to Gotham, and this intercutting of these different periods of Bruce Wayne's life and his journey that he goes to, finding out what it is he wants to do to try and get justice for his parents' murder.
Yeah, a lot of the first sequences are told in flashback, where he's essentially speaking to Liam Neeson's character Ducard, discussing with him about essentially how he got there, why he left Gotham as the millionaire playboy that he was. He's instantly recognised by Ducard in their first meeting.
Who's played by Liam Neeson.
Played by Liam Neeson, yeah. Instantly recognised by him as Bruce Wayne, and the millionaire playboy, and who should be living it up in his big mansion back in Gotham. So these stories set the framework as to why he's doing this travel around the world and learning all these.
And this is in
techniques.
prison. This is kind of in prison.
Mm-hmm.
He's just had a fight with criminals where he's using these convicts as practice.
Yeah.
So it's
I love the line where the guy says to him, you're in hell and I'm the devil, and he goes, "You're not the devil, you're just practice to me."
Yeah.
And
really and the prison guard saying, "You need protection. I don't need protection from them. It's not from them. It's for them, from you." And it's really good. But you have Ducard in his cell, and how is he suddenly materialized in his cell? And maybe that's part of the question answers, that he's using his own techniques to do the kind of stuff you would expect Batman to do.
Absolutely. So Ducard offers him the path of the League of Shadows, which is an organization essentially where Bruce will learn a lot of the techniques that lead him to become Batman. In the comic books, they're not called the League of Shadows. In the comic books, they're called the League of Assassins. But I think if you tried to encourage Bruce Wayne to join the League of Assassins, he'd probably know instantly there's something wrong here.
Yeah, and Ducard is also then this spokesman for this person, Ra's al Ghul, and he states that within the cell.
So Ducard sets a task for Bruce to collect a rare blue flower in the mountains and climb up to a hidden monastery in the mountains to meet with Ra's al Ghul, and the League of Shadows to continue his training with him.
Yeah, and so there's this climb to the monastery after he's been released from prison, essentially. And there's this great landscape shot, for me anyway, of the glaciers and the ice, and this occurs a few times throughout these flashbacks and the intercutting as he makes his way up to the monastery where the League of Shadows are, which is very reminiscent of the opening shots of Insomnia, actually. Yeah. But it's a great moment where you have this landscape image, wide shot, panning through and across the glaciers and ice, and you really see Wally Pfister's cinematography here, and it's important to him and Christopher Nolan in really tight collaboration in this film and for the rest of the trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful shot. Yeah, and when he gets up to the monastery, Bruce kind of has a little bit later has a bit of a chat with Ducard and kind of talks to him about his past and his fears. Another flashback to Bruce as a child playing with his friend Rachel Dawes in the garden, falls down a well, and is only saved when his father comes down, picks him out of the well. But has been sitting in the well surrounded by bats in their natural environment, essentially. And this is what terrifies Bruce most of all, is bats. They are his symbol of his fear. Really interesting one to bring up from Christopher Nolan, isn't it?
Definitely. It's that juxtaposition of the thing that ultimately Bruce Wayne should never become. Mm-hmm. A bat, because he's terrified of them. It's like my fear of Spider. I would never obviously be Spider-Man because I'd be too afraid of myself.
Get some radar.
But it's that whole thing, and as you say about his dad giving him the advice of you need to pick yourself up, you learn from your stumbles to become a better person. And this idea, you try and build and get over those fears. Mm-hmm. This is his big fear. This is his fall as a young person, the impression on it, and the bats just swirling around him. but ultimately it's the symbol, it's the image, it's the metaphor that he uses
that your
for
fears,
his purposes in the future.
That you can't let your fears overtake you. And Ducard and his father both have the same kind of way of talking to Bruce, that they're telling him all the time, don't let your fears overtake you. You can use your fears to become stronger and more powerful. I think that's really important throughout this film. While Thomas Wayne is only in the film for a couple of flashbacks, his presence is quite strong within Bruce. He obviously was a very good role model for him and for the city of Gotham.
Ducard is saying the same thing. I mean, in terms of that climb to the monastery and in the prison, it is all about this idea of fear. Bruce Wayne, as a young adult in the monastery, is like he wants to seek the means to fight injustice and to put fear into those people who use fear on others. Yeah. Really important line about fear being a central part of this movie and using it on others or using it to become stronger and to become something elevated above the everyday and your own fears.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have the whole scene, obviously, of the death of Thomas and Martha, which takes place in flashback again with young Bruce being brought to the opera by his father, telling him how the Waynes have helped inspire the city of Gotham. The two of them are socialites within Gotham. They take the train from their house down to the opera to go and see a big production of what I always thought was the Fledermaus when I was younger, but which
wouldn't that be a dreadful thing for a father to do, to take the son to an opera or a movie or a concert of something that he hates?
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be like me going to a jazz concert. Well, my dad taking me to a jazz concert, or something like that. But really interesting thing we found out is that, because I had the same thing, I always thought that opera in Batman Begins was Das Fledermaus, and it's not.
Yeah, it's Mephistophele. There's my terrible Italian accent for tonight.
It's a Faustian opera, isn't it?
Yeah, like the central story of the opera is that it's a story of a demon who comes up from hell to try and corrupt the hero of the story, tempting him in various different ways, and the hero wins out at the end, which I think is fascinating because it's obviously plays quite clearly into the Batman Begins story.
Yeah, and that whole story and mythos. And one of the things, just quickly, as they're heading towards the opera and they're on this public transport system, this monorail.
I can't hear that word. They're thinking of The Simpsons again.
Monorail. I know. I had that myself. But you get this impression. It's something I suppose we'll touch on a bit later. But the Waynes are philanthropic. They're philanthropists, and you find that Thomas Wayne is divorced from the running of Wayne Enterprises, that he leaves that in the hands of people that know more about that. But actually, he's taken a step back from that. He obviously still benefits from it, but he works in the hospital as a doctor, helping other people. And it's really setting up that notion of the Waynes giving something back to their society, their city, to other people less fortunate than themselves, in different ways. And we'll come to that a bit more, I think, later on.
So his parents are gunned down by Joe Chill. This is quite similar to the original comic book origins, that Bruce sees the murderer of his parents, and this face stays with him for the rest of his life, essentially. It's a random act of violence. Joe Chill is stealing the pearls of his mother and the wallet of his father, and then kills them in cold blood, and runs off into the night.
You get that classic pan back of the camera shot as well from Nolan, where you have that death scene of the young Bruce Wayne in between his father and his mother, exactly as we have seen in the extended Gotham trailer just a week ago. That classic pan back, very bloodless. Then we get introduced to him and Jim Gordon.
Yeah, and I just remember remember at the time the casting of Gary Oldman in a part which is quite central to the whole Gotham universe, but in a part that isn't a villain, was thought of as a really unusual thing. And I remember at the time, Gary Oldman was always, to me, he was the bad guy in True Romance. He was an evil guy in Leon. He was
Dracula.
He was Dracula. the other type of bat. But he's almost unrecognizable in this film.
It was great casting, actually.
He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. But I think you got to the end of the film and saw his name in the credits again and went, "Oh yeah, Gary Oldman was supposed to be in this. Who did he play again?" Yeah. But a great Jim Gordon, though, I must say.
And one of the interesting things, just quickly as well, to try and bring it back to the TV show, is that this space that the TV show Gotham will inhabit is this moment in the film where Jim Gordon is sat down with the young Bruce Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually you have that in the trailer and you have it in this film. But Gotham will inhabit that space. This film jumps to where he's suddenly then a young adult going off to university or then going off. It inhabits that world in between that and Batman beginning.
Exactly. Yeah, so then we're back to Ducard. So, obviously Bruce has been relaying all this information to Ducard, Liam Neeson, providing all this detailed background history of himself and the Wayne family.
I do want to kind of just quickly point out as well that on getting to the monastery, he immediately gets kicked in the stomach by Ducard and is like, he's there going, I have no strength left. And he goes, fear, injustice waits for nothing.
Yeah.
And he's immediately embroiled in this fight. And then, as you say, it's like this is all teasing out as a conversation between Bruce Wayne and Ducard at the monastery about his parents and about that tragic murder.
Yeah, and then it leads to an awesome fight on an ice lake in the center of this glacial environment in the mountains of the monastery. I love this fight. I think it's really, really good. And Liam Neeson had just come off playing Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars, so it felt like another Star Wars battle with Qui-Gon Jinn. Really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I love this fight as well. I love the creaking of the ice underneath their feet as they're battling. And I think it's a really interesting scene of the film, and certainly in this whole section of what makes Bruce Wayne tick, what it is that it drives him, because this duel that's happening on the ice between Ducard and Bruce Wayne is intercut with the monastery and Ducard teaching him things like about theatricality and deception, being a master of your senses and the training. Then it cuts back with, that crime cannot be tolerated on whilst they're fighting on the ice lake, the frozen ice lake, and that criminals feed on the tolerance of society, and it's kind of this mantra of the League of Shadows. And then it's the riling up of Bruce Wayne with the death of your parents was not your fault, it was your father's. And it ultimately, despite all this training from the League of Shadows, that Bruce Wayne is still raw, and his emotions take over. This idea of Bruce Wayne as Batman investigating things, making sure he's absolutely sure of his evidence in order to follow up on these bad guys that he will eventually fight in the future. But he's governed by his emotions, and Ducard sort of teases that out of him, whereby you have that great line where he goes, you compromised your footing for a fatal blow, as he hits the ice and Bruce Wayne falls then into the frozen water.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the ice-cold water. So it's really good little scene, I think.
Yeah, I love some of the background stuff about this scene that actually was fought on an ice lake. The whole area was frozen over. The following morning when they woke up after doing that full scene, all the cracking was real. That ice lake had melted completely overnight. So all that cracking that they were hearing, it's a pretty dangerous place to put your two main actors from a film. But it's followed up with Ducard telling Bruce to rub your chest, your arms will take care of themselves, which apparently Liam Neeson has said in the past that this was a piece that he made up on set. It has no basis in fact, no theory behind it, and he's always worried that there's going to be some Boy Scouts sitting out in the wood freezing to death because they're listening to Ducard's advice, essentially, which I think is really
So, Boy Scouts everywhere, do not rub your chest only to keep warm.
Your arms will not take care of themselves.
They will go black and fall off.
Exactly. This is where we get a little bit more information about Raz, that his wife was taken from him when he was younger, and this anger drove him to take the vengeance that he takes on people. This is something that plays into some of the later films, actually. about Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, so he says the line, "Why do you not want vengeance? I did." And it's suddenly teasing out these differences between these two characters as well. It kind of provides this start of that Bruce Wayne and Ducard, whilst they maybe don't know it themselves yet, there are some subtle differences in how they are and would approach criminals and fighting crime and fighting injustice or perceived injustice, which obviously down the line you see is quite different.
Absolutely.
It's the start of that.
Yeah. Like we see Bruce is still very raw from the death of his parents. It's another flashback scene where he goes back to when Joe Chill, the murderer of his parents, is being released from prison, or potentially being released from prison on the advice of the district attorney, because he lived for years in the same cell as Carmine Falcone, who's going to become a very central character as we go through the film. So Joe Chill has some information that the DA want on him, and after 17 years, even though he murdered the most high-profile people in the city and essentially destroyed Bruce's life, the DA is recommending that he's going to be released from prison, and Bruce can't take this. So the young Bruce, who's just come back from college, essentially, hoping to see justice for Joe Chill, can't take this and goes to the courts to try and murder him.
You see him put his revolver into his coat pocket. You have this whole thing as well. Just prior to that, you really get a sense of him being down on his luck, really quite down, depressed about the whole thing, about even just him being a Wayne and his family's wealth and inheritance. What does it matter? He calls Wayne Mansion a mausoleum.
Yeah.
There's sheets all over the place. And we see Alfred, played by Michael Caine, saying there are those who care about what you do with your future. You get that sense of this supportive, sort of fatherly figure of Alfred Pennyworth, played, amazingly by Michael Caine, who gets the balance of being a butler, some sly wisecracks and some sarcasm. He gets that balance really well. And then, he just nails the emotional points of the relationship between Bruce and Alfred, I think, really well.
Yeah, like you can see he's the trusted family friend as well as everything else, and he's a father figure to Bruce, but he's always gonna have a dig at him if Bruce is going too far and stepping too far over the line. Yeah.
But Bruce then obviously heads down to the courtroom to this release hearing for Joe Chill, and ultimately wants to shoot this guy, to take vengeance. He is wanting to take vengeance, and that's taken away from him.
Bruce essentially takes the first steps towards killing Joe Chill. As he walks towards Joe, surrounded by press. The press see Bruce and instantly recognizes him, and it's like, Bruce Wayne, what's your comment on this? As the press are distracted, an unnamed blonde woman walks out of the shadows, shoots Joe Chill, saying, "Falcone says hi." This scene was really reminiscent for me of the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald, an event that was pretty much televised in the States, when someone jumped out of the shadows and shot Lee Harvey Oswald. And I think that's definitely a reference point for Christopher Nolan in this scene.
Yeah, I think so. And you start to think, how things would have panned out so differently if he was recognised and if he had shot Joe Chill. Yeah. It's obviously, the story is that he never goes down that revenge route. He's not able to get revenge. He has to think about things another way.
Yeah.
And you then come to him in the car with Rachel, and I think she gives him her take on essentially what he has been and has missed about Gotham, that this is a city that is rotting, that Falcone is flooding the city with drugs, producing crime, and undermining everything that his parents work with. And she ultimately is saying there is a difference between revenge and justice, and it's this. You've had Alfred's fatherly figure saying there are people concerned and worried about what you will become and your future and what you want to do with that life previously, and then you're now bookending that with the advice of his oldest friend and contemporary Rachel Dawes disgusted the fact that he wanted to kill. He thinks he's something completely different from her, that I'm not the person you think I am. And she's trying to say to him, look, there is a difference between justice and taking revenge. One is for yourself and one is for the betterment of society. And she gives him a good slap for it as well, and two for good measure.
Yeah, exactly. I really love Katie Holmes in this scene. I think she really plays this sequence definitely really, really well. There's a lovely little cinematic piece that Nolan does here as well, where he essentially shows you the 3 tiers of Gotham. Above the skyline tier, which is where Wayne Enterprises and all those executives occupy, and then you've got the mid-level section of Gotham, which Bruce kind of wants to protect and talks about trying to defend from the criminals. But then Rachel takes him into the underbelly and the bowels of Gotham, the area that he's essentially just been ignoring because he's been focusing on his own pain and what Joe Chill did to his family and destroyed it. 22-year-old kid, obviously, so he's been away and had been protected from this for years. But it's not hidden; it's just he's been avoiding it essentially.
Yeah, and it's she kind of forces home the point to Bruce that his parents stood against injustice and that is being undermined, and that ultimately what he tried to do by shooting Joe Chill, that his father would be ashamed. I mean, emotional blackmail, but I mean, good and correct, reconnecting Bruce Wayne with his murdered family, and just to give him that realization that he can't do what he thinks he should be doing. And it sets him as well on this other path of not seeking purely revenge or vengeance.
Yeah, and she very much sets up the idea that it's not one person that's caused the death of your family and the destruction of your life and the horror that is Gotham now. There's many people that are involved. She brings him to the front door of Carmine Falcone's club and says, walk in there, take him out. That's the man you got to worry about, even though he may not have been the one that pulled the trigger, but he filled the city with drugs and has turned everybody against each other. If you want to go take him out, go right ahead. Everybody knows where he is, but everybody's always too scared to take him out.
And it leads then to, for me, one of the really great scenes of the film between Carmine Falcone, played here by Tom Wilkinson.
Love Tom Wilkinson in this film. Yeah.
I mean, if you probably know him from In the Bedroom, which is a great film, really emotionally strong look at bereavement, and it doesn't sound like a barrel of laughs, and it's not, but I mean, him and Sissy Spacek play that amazingly. I mean, absolutely. I was like gobsmacked when I saw that film. Really good. He was, of course, in The Full Monty, Rock and Roller, and Michael Clayton. Really great set of films where he's normally playing support. In The Bedroom, it's not, but it's... In The Bedroom, he never plays support. Sorry, In The Bedroom, the film, like he's the main character in that with Sissy Spacek, but he normally plays amazing support roles.
Yeah. And this is just another one to add to that list.
Absolutely, and it's a great body of work, and he's done a lot as well. But it's a really good number of films that we could definitely recommend for those interested.
Yeah, I love how confident though he takes on Bruce when Bruce walks in. It's this kid. He sees him instantly. Goes, "Hey, you here to thank me for killing that Joe guy?" Basically,
I'm slightly offended that you've not brought a gun. Really good. And then he kind of points out, he kind of takes this speech, and it's almost the flip side of what Rachel Dawes has just told him, and he goes, look around, kid, I've got a judge, union official, 2 off-duty cops, and so on, that's power you can't buy. This idea, he has it in his hand, and he can control it because I can shoot you, and he pulls out his gun, just like that. No consequences for me because I've bought people off. I have my people in their places, and they will stop anything from getting at me.
And that's it. And again, that's the power of fear. People from your world have nothing to fear. You always fear what you don't understand. It's again bringing it back to the fear motif that's going throughout this film. It's all about that kind of fear that everybody has of Carmine, and that's why they won't take him down.
Yeah, and he, threateningly, he says, "You haven't thought about your lady friend, Rachel Dawes, or your butler, Alfred Pennyworth. That menace that he has and the confidence that he has. It's really, really well played. And that scene, that interaction between the two is amazing because for most of it, Bruce is kind of just silent, almost dejected. Yeah. But you get the sense that he's listening and he's learning because of what Rachel has just said.
Yeah, absolutely.
To him. So,
and this is what drives Bruce to leave the city. This is what drives him to leave Gotham. He's had this fight with Rachel, his best friend. He thinks Alfred may have cast him off, even though Alfred's trying to protect him. He's had this fight with Falcone, and he just goes, you know what? I can do nothing in this city anymore. I'm not going back to university, and hops a ship and off on his travels, where we pick back up at the end of those travels with Ducard again.
And there's a nice touch there then on that flashback to the monastery where he's explaining how he's gone now on this journey to conquer the fear, but to understand criminals, to understand the criminals that Falcone has just been talking to him about, explaining to him. He wants to now understand that because Falcone has kind of left him with that message that people from your world, the wealthy world, they don't understand this world, that 3-tier level that you were describing before that Nolan sets up. Actually, there's a nice touch as well where, Bruce Wayne gets arrested and it's that point where he must get arrested and put into the prison that we see him in, where, he says to the cops, I'm not a criminal. And the cop says, tell that to the guy you've stolen from, as he taps with his foot this box that's got Wayne Enterprises on. That's a little neat touch. And
it's just showing that he's exploring the criminal underworld, but doesn't actually partake, essentially. So he's kind of setting up little plays for himself to see the feelings and see the actual sensations that all these criminals are going through, so he can eventually use that against them in the future. And then back to Ducard's training of Bruce. This is where they crush up the blue flower that we talked about at the start. They
incense, start to smoke it.
Yeah, and then we realise the blue flower has some hallucinogenic properties involved in it. And it's a really cool scene as well.
And Ducard kind of says as he's inhaling the smoke from this blue flower that, to combat fear, you must become fear. This hallucinogen sort of takes over. And actually, it's great, really understated visual effects done really well as well, where you start to just get this pulsating sort of world around when you get the view from Bruce Wayne with this hallucinogen running through him, and the eyes of Ducard and other members of the League of Shadows in their assassin suits sort of through the sort of balaclava slit. You see that their eyes are kind of like little silver circles, and it's really a nice visual effect.
Really unnerving kind of scene. It's showing the fear starting to be instilled into Bruce, and then they have the little moment, which is the box at the end of right behind all of these League of Shadow assassins or League of Shadow ninjas, whichever way you want to look at it. Little box at the back of it, which Bruce is drawn towards by the hallucinogen that he's just taken. He opens it up and bats fly out and he falls to the floor in a moment of fear. I'm wondering whether that box had anything in it at all, or whether it's like the Bogart in Harry Potter, where it essentially manifests itself as your greatest fear, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely what it is, and I think that whole scene where Ducard is challenging him to, it's a test. This is a whole test. He's taken the hallucinogen. Ducard is blending in with the other ninjas, and it is this test of to try and find one another before the other person finds you. And all the way through this test, there is this narrative from Ducard that is ultimately about him becoming, or Bruce Wayne becoming, the Batman. It's this narrative of you must become an idea, you must become a concept, and it leads to this box and bats fly out. And to me, that's a really just clever narrative that this person is going to become the Batman. And which path does he take? One of vengeance or one of standing against injustice?
Yeah, and as his reward for essentially winning this challenge by discovering Ducard amongst all the ninjas, and him discovering Ducard before he discovers Bruce, as his reward he gets initiated into the League of Shadows, and a new challenge is set for him, which is to murder a local farmer who's
been stealing animals from other farmers,
and has also murdered another farmer. It's, essentially the justice that the League of Shadows will take is, he murdered someone, we kill him. Bruce stands up and says, "This is not who I'm going to be. I'm not going to become an executioner." And that's directly from the comics. This is Bruce saying, "I am not going to become a killer, regardless of who you people are and what your beliefs are. My belief is I'm not going to be a killer." Directly from the comics, this is, a central point of Batman is that he doesn't murder people. Kind of problem in the scene, though, in that they don't agree with him. So he essentially kills all of the League of Shadows that are in this training facility, burns down the facility, kills Ra's al Ghul, all because of his actions, yeah.
Yeah, but and at the same time, though, he does save Ducard.
Mm-hmm.
Ducard is knocked out. He saves him from the burning building. In a sense, with regards to Ra's al Ghul, he is defending himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that he's willfully going to, kill him. It's because Ra's al Ghul is attacking him. So, yeah, he doesn't want to be the executioner for this helpless person.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to do that. But in the death of Ra's al Ghul, that is because of how he then goes forward. And it's pure, in a sense, defense of his position that he's taken.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
true.
I think.
Yeah,
that's
no,
my
true.
kind of feeling. I think one of the other really interesting things that starts to develop in this scene is you get the first noticeable part of the Batman theme from Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard. And you hear that Batman theme beginning to develop, beginning to evolve. And this is one of the really interesting aspects of this collaboration. Principally then as well, moving into the other two films between Zimmer and Nolan, is this idea that you don't start the film with this fully formed theme tune for the protagonist, and in this case Batman. It's just an elemental aspect of it, which I think in that opening sequence that I talked about earlier on, of all the bats swirling around, it is this idea of the drum beat as you build into those bats swirling around and then moving into the opening of the film.
Yeah.
And then here we begin to get that evolution of that theme, where it adds additional layers onto the theme. And this will continue throughout the rest of the film, where it adds more and more and more until the final credits.
Yeah. Hans Zimmer is another one of those great contemporary composers of cinematic music at the moment. People like Howard Shore in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where they're using their own music to do a full storyline of their film in their own head. Some of them read every single piece of dialogue and just write music for each scene. Those guys in particular, Howard Shore and Hans Zimmer, are people that will write their actual theme and a motif for each individual character and start bringing them all together as a movie progresses or as a trilogy progresses in some stages, where, every time you hear a piece of music, it's supposed to evoke in your head that this is Batman.
So as Bruce Wayne evolves and develops into the Batman, so too the theme for Batman becomes stronger and stronger and stronger as it progresses through the film. And again, it's just one of it marries conceptually together what's going on in the film really, really well. And I think for Zimmer, that happens then in Dark Knight with respect to the Joker.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to Dark Knight. This theme is essentially what closes out our Act 1, isn't it? This is where it kind of closes out the arc of Bruce Wayne learning everything he needs to become Batman, and then starts to make his moves to move back to Gotham from the Himalayas.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Theatricality and deception are powerful agents. You must become more than just a man in the mind of your opponent.
I think one of the other things to explore as well is this idea of the flashbacks, the setup that goes on in Act 1, and in a sense that jumping around, because you get flashbacks to when he's a kid, you get flashbacks when he's about to leave to go to university. And I think sometimes looking at the film, you could think that it was a flash forward almost. And then you've got the narrative going on in the Himalayas, which is almost the current timeline, if you will. So there's a lot of flashbacks, a lot of jumping around, and a lot of setup. And, we want to explore certain criticisms of the film as well. And this was one of them, that, there was a lot of exposition and there was a lot of cutting around between young Bruce Wayne, very young adult Bruce Wayne, and then obviously his story as a late 20s in the Himalayas.
Yeah, and at this stage, it's about 45 minutes into the film, and we haven't seen Batman.
Yeah.
We haven't got the suit. So previously to Batman Begins, I think every single film would have either started with a scene with Bruce Wayne in costume as Batman, and would have continued on for that way. Then you find out a bit about his backstory after that, but you definitely get your hero up front in a suit. I think from this point onwards in a lot of movies, this was kind of the tack they took, that they did the development for quite a long time before they put on the suit. And when we go into Act 2, it's going to be very much about how he gets the suit and how he builds it and why he builds it.
Exactly. And I think, primarily one of the criticisms was essentially that, maybe a succinct story would have been better. But it would have been at the expense, and we would have lost the development of Batman and the development of Batman as a theme, and that sort of idea, I think, that we were talking about there being a balance that Nolan was looking to strike between, who is Batman, why does Batman exist, and in what environment, and then also a story narrative to take that through.
Yeah, and a summer blockbuster action film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that I do think that Nolan, as a director, very much in his films explores themes. So it was memory loss and amnesia within Memento. Mm-hmm. It was lack of sleep, insomnia in Insomnia. And I think here he's looking at this theme of, why would there be the need for a Batman? Why does he exist? And who would he be? And he explores these themes in films. And I think very like Terrence Malick, it's that wide-angle shot of look back and capture everything that society would see and allow people to have that wide-angle look. I think he's very much that type of filmmaker. Mm-hmm. I like Terrence Malick as well. I think Nolan has maybe a slightly bigger output than Terrence Malick. Yeah. But, sometimes the criticism that would be leveled at that approach is it has an expense of the story sometimes, or maybe people feel the story is maybe given a slight disservice or not enough time to breathe. Yeah,
and I think if you're going to go and see a summer blockbuster this particular year and you were going to go and see Batman Begins, you would probably be coming out of it a little, maybe not disappointed, but you'd be coming out not having your original expectations met. I hope you've seen a better film than you probably were expecting to see in the first place. But I do think it's not a huge criticism, but my feeling is that this is where David Goyer and Chris Nolan clashed a lot. I would say David Goyer, knowing the stuff that he's written before, he was very much thinking he was making a comic book film to begin with. He wrote the story as a comic book film. He wrote, hey, let's have a battle on the ice. Let's have Ra's al Ghul from the comic books. Let's have Victor Zsasz. Let's have all these comic book villains. Mm-hmm. And Nolan came in and went, well, actually, let's slow it down here. Let's show the creation of why Bruce Wayne would put on the suit. Okay, let's slow it down here and show why Bruce Wayne would learn these techniques in a foreign land. And that's where I think Nolan has done an amazing job with the film and turning it into a proper cinematic experience rather than just a comic book movie.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And so that really kind of takes us into Act 2 then, where you this is, I think that we said at the start, this is becoming Batman. This is the beginning of an idea and the development of that idea by Bruce Wayne, following the reasons for him wanting to do this, in a sense, and him going down that path where this is the way he would seek justice in Gotham.
Yeah, he's taking everything that he's learned from the League of Shadows and seeing if he can implement it in his own city to save the people of the city, not to destroy it.
He gets back on his jet. Alfred meets him. Really kind of light moment where he's like, well, I'm the Lord of Wayne Manor. I'm the guy in charge. Like, you've not been there for 7 years, and
you can borrow the rolls if you like. Yeah.
Exactly. Just remember to top up the tank of petrol, and so 7 years has gone by whilst he's been in the Himalayas, exploring the criminals, and then obviously training with the League of Shadows. Mm-hmm. And he comes back to Gotham, where you find out he's been declared dead, Bruce Wayne, and there's Mr. Earl. There's this guy in the boardroom, Mr. Earl, at the top of Wayne Towers, who's played by Rutger Hauer. And you have an interesting fact on.
I'm really fact boy tonight. I love this. This is because of Christopher Nolan's.
I can't believe you found out before me because I'm such a fan of the film.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Because of Christopher Nolan's love of Blade Runner, it's one of his favourite films. And that's the style of film he wanted to make with Batman Begins. It's the film he showed the full cast and crew before making Batman Begins and said, this is exactly the type of film I want to make. He cast Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner in this part of Mr.
You mean one that was a commercial flop and then gradually became... and
killed every company that sponsored it as well, yeah. But yeah, I love the fact that that's how he got... That's why he got Rutger Hauer on board. It's he's in the part of Mr. Earl, but it is a very small part, and when you see Rutger Hauer, most people just go, "Oh, he's a bad guy."
Yeah.
But he plays a really good. It's one of the other elements that's threatening to destroy Bruce Wayne's world throughout this film is the crushing sensation of Wayne Enterprises, which he has no control over, and he's considered as being just benefiting from it. And Mr. Earl's trying to take that away as well. He's trying to just go, "Well, you don't really have any ownership of this. Your father's dead. He didn't have any involvement in it, and I'm going to do whatever I want to at this company."
Yeah. So the main thing we kind of find from this is that Wayne Enterprises is going to go public, and that actually Mr. Earl has actually declared that Bruce Wayne is dead because he's not been around for then 7 years at that stage.
So here we get introduced to another villain from the Rogues Gallery of Batman. We get introduced to Dr. Jonathan Crane, who's a psychiatrist sitting in the courtroom defending another of the Rogues Gallery. This is just Rogues Gallery after Rogues Gallery. He's defending Victor Zsasz, who, if anybody's read the comic books, Victor Zsasz is the creepiest. He's not pizzazz, no. Victor Zsasz. He's probably the creepiest of all the villains. He's a serial killer who, every time he kills someone, he cuts a line in his skin. So every time you see him in the future, he's got more and more cuts within his skin. He's a creepy character.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and he's
weirdly played by
the lead singer of James, Tim Booth.
Yeah.
And James is this band which I remember growing up with these songs. It's "Oh, Sit Down" and "Sit Down Next to Me" and all the.
That's only one song.
That's only one song. But and I remember all these different songs, Born of Frustration, all these different types of songs which I really kind of liked, and all of a sudden I found out that this one band from Manchester actually had done them all, and really a good set of tracks. But here we find him sort of
playing a creepy serial killer.
Yeah, playing a creepy serial killer.
If anybody doesn't know the music of James, they're kind of like a mid-90s hippie band. I would kind of think of them as. So seeing him play in his first cinematic role with only 2 lines, I think, in the entire film, but playing a creepy serial killer was quite a surprise for me. But yeah, Dr. Crane is obviously the bigger role in this scene. Particularly, he has a way of getting criminals off.
And he's played by Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, the fantastic Irish actor Cillian Murphy, who's become a bit of a touchstone from that point onwards for Christopher Nolan.
Yeah,
he's been in
big collaborator.
I think every film that Christopher Nolan's done since then.
With the exception of The Prestige, I think.
That's right.
He was in Inception. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether he's going to be in Interstellar. I don't recall him, but obviously Michael Caine is, and that's one of the things that you suddenly realise, just as a side point, that, obviously Christopher Nolan as a director likes to have a settled team to an extent around him. I mean, if you think his wife Emma Thompson as one of his producers and executive producers, Hans Zimmer in terms of the composer, you have Chris Corbould, special effects supervisor. Yeah. You then have
and Christian Bale, obviously, in Inception and the 3 Batman films.
No, Christian Bale, Prestige, and the 3 Batman films.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then you have David S. Goyer, at least for the Batman films, was involved in all 3. Mm-hmm. And you have Cillian Murphy, Christian Bale, Michael Caine, all sort of those actors been involved, and we now see Catwoman, Anne Hathaway, obviously in Interstellar. Then the great Wally Pfister as cinematographer.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, he really likes his team and keeps them around him. There's a lot of them that have actually been working with him in the behind the scenes all the way back to The Following and Memento. Yeah.
But coming back to Dr. Jonathan Crane, as we know him at this moment in the courtroom scene, and I find out that, Victor Zsasz is just a thug of Carmine Falcone in this instance, but there's a great little interchange between Rachel Dawes and Dr. Crane there, just outside the courtroom, where, she's kind of suspicious of maybe his motives, that he may be corrupt and in the payroll of one of the mobsters. And she's kind of challenging him on why someone who, kills people would be sent to a psychiatric hospital and not just sent into prison. And Dr. Crane just argues Gotham must have an affinity to the insane. And Rachel Dawes replies with, or the corrupt. And I think that really neatly encapsulates sort of this idea of Gotham as the city. That there is this affinity to just insanity. You could even argue that someone going around in a bat suit is a bit insane.
Yeah. Joker argues that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Or then just the downright sort of corrupt and dirty. And I think there's a really good exchange that just sort of, again, just encapsulates this notion of what Gotham is. And then we get the look at some of the first investigations that Bruce Wayne starts to do in relation to his parents' murder, I think.
Yeah. He's looking into Falcone. He's looking into trying to find out a way to take Falcone down. You see him drawing it all together, trying to work out what he's going to do and how he's going to take him down. So it's the first criminal investigation of the master investigator, I suppose. But while he's sitting there, another scene directly taken from the comic book Year One. A bat flies into his study and gives him the idea of, this is the thing that scares me the most. I'm going to take this as my symbol. Alfred says that there's a bat nest somewhere on the grounds, and after his experience as a child, Bruce knows exactly where that is. It's down the well that he fell down as a kid. He breaks in, and this becomes the starting of his bat cave.
Yeah, and I think it becomes this great sort of birthing moment for the concept of Batman as he explores the Batcave. And it's just, again, it's that great shot, and we again have the Hans Zimmer theme comes roaring in and builds and develops as Bruce Wayne is essentially consumed by all the nesting bats swirling around him and moving around him, and you get this huge sort of this feeling of Bruce Wayne being born into the Batman as he kind of stretches up, and he then it's almost like he breathes in the whole moment and so on, with all these bats swirling around. And I mean, it's a huge sort of pivotal moment within the film where this central concept of the idea of becoming the Batman and using the bat as his way of instilling fear into his enemies or his opponents is born, and it's a great shot, and it just builds this theme, like we say, with the music and this idea of the Batman with this motif of all, obviously, the bats, which again from Year One, that swarm of bats idea. Yeah,
directly out of Year One,
Yeah, and one of the great things that, this pivotal moment, and I think it was on Empire magazine there recently where they just talk about Nolan as the auteur, like how, yes, all these bats are digitally rendered in post-production, swarming around, but there's this lovely sort of on-set image of Chris Nolan he's got his... with this one bat on a stick, and he's kind of playing it around Christian Bale's head in the Batcave, just to give him this idea where you might get some reflex from him and getting out of the way and so on, whilst it's being filmed. And it's just that idea that, so hands-on. Yeah. It's a great kind of moment to see behind the scenes. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. The question's been asked for many years, could anybody be Batman if they had the money? But No, not really. We've kind of mentioned it already. You have to have the team around you. We've mentioned the fact that Rachel is one of his closest allies, even though she doesn't know who he is. Alfred's one of his closest allies. Jim is going to become one of his closest allies. And now we're introduced to a kind of a new character to a lot of people. Most of those characters have existed in the past. Lucius Fox in the comics came in the 70s, but it was used occasionally.
Played by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Ding.
Yeah, the wonderful Morgan Freeman. And finally answers the question of... I know what John's alluding to, and I'm not going to mention it.
Can you guess what?
So Lucius Fox finally answers the question that posed by the Joker in the 1989 Tim Burton film. Where does Batman get all those wonderful toys? Well, apparently it's from Applied Sciences in Wayne Enterprises. Bruce goes for a job for Mr. Earl, doesn't want to take over the company. He goes to get a job in Applied Sciences working with Lucius Fox. Kind of working. He's really just stealing all the good gadgets for himself. So the first thing he asks for is a Kevlar suit, which is bulletproof for some spelunking. Which at this time was the first time I realised the next scene after that he actually does go spelunking. He jumps into the Batcave, actual cave diving. So which I thought was quite fun. But yeah, Lucius provides him with a load of toys, really, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I think you get that kind of sense just from the glint in Lucius Fox's eye, that this sense that he knows something. Mm-hmm. He knows something's going on. And certainly later on in the film, you get this idea that Alfred and Lucius are much better acquainted than what you get any other sense, where it's in Bruce's bedroom and they kind of talking about some antidote, and it's like, Lucius, Alfred. There's this kind of knowing sort of look between the two gentlemen, and it's
absolutely. Despite the fact that Lucius says, "I don't want to know anything that you're doing, Mr. Wayne. You can do whatever you want to." That means
you own the company. Yeah. This is your stuff anyway.
It means I have plausible deniability. You know exactly that he knows.
So you get this sense that he knows what's going on, but you then get this series of scenes within the film that are cutting in and out of Bruce Wayne going to Lucius Fox to get more gadgets, just finding out, he turns up and goes, well, what about sort of base jumping? And Lucius Fox goes for the billionaire spelunking base jumper kind of thing, and and this is all about finding the cape for the Batman. He then sort of comes back and he kind of is introduced to what ultimately becomes the Batmobile, the Tumbler, where then they go for a test drive and you get the classic line, does it come in black? People say the fun is taken out of the Batman because of all this kind of quite heavy exposition about how he gets the Batsuit. For me, personally, this just fed my kid of wanting to build stuff.
Absolutely.
And for me, it was maybe a bit of tinfoil and some cardboard box or something, a bit of throw-off material. This is the next 20 levels above that.
Yeah.
But to me, this just fed that inner kid to this development and building of this like great toy. But in this case, it's the Batsuit, it's the Batmobile. All this intercutting between Lucius and Bruce Wayne coming to Lucius, and the creation of the Batsuit, the development of the Batcave, and ultimately the development of the team surrounding Batman. I was just on the side of the Batcave, you get this really interesting tale between Alfred and Bruce Wayne about how his great-great-grandfather used to bring slaves north during the American Civil War, and it's one of the things we talked about, that not only is there a backstory there for Bruce Wayne, but also for Batman and the creation of Batman, but there are snippets throughout this film where there's also a bit of a backstory developing just for the Wayne family.
Absolutely.
So you find out his great-great-grandfather was involved in liberating slaves during the American Civil War. Earlier on, you got the reveal that Bruce's father doesn't run Wayne Enterprises, but prefers to become a medical doctor helping people, and also building the railway, the monorail, with Lucius Fox. And again, this is another tie-in of Lucius Fox into this family that's been sort of just hinted at earlier in the story, and that knowing glint suddenly takes on a different meaning, which is really interesting. So, yeah, and then
they definitely set up the generations of Waynes, of the Waynes as being saviors of Gotham, essentially, as being helpers in Gotham and in America as a whole. Yeah.
And I think with that building of the team, then you begin to get a bit more information. We were introduced to Jim Gordon immediately after Bruce's mum and dad were killed and murdered in Gotham City Police Department.
Yeah.
And now we sort of kind of get reintroduced to Jim Gordon again, obviously years later, where he's with Detective Flass. And again, that's that reference from Batman Year One also.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's a much older, kind of wiser detective. He's dealing with his partner Flass, who's on the take from everybody and anybody he can get money from. He'll essentially take it. He says essentially that everybody feels that Jim Gordon makes them all nervous because he doesn't take. If you don't dip your beak, then we all get nervous around you. Maybe we think you're a rat, and he provides us with our line that we've used on our website, which is and at the start of every episode, which is in a town this bent. Who's there to rat to anyway? But Flass is a proper dirty cop. He's a proper evil guy. I'm wondering if there's going to be a character very like him in the Gotham TV show. I'm suspecting there might be one that we've already been introduced to. Yeah. But then Bruce takes to the streets for the first time, not in the full bat suit, but very similar to Year One. He takes to the streets in a kind of a made-up suit where hopefully nobody will recognise his appearance, essentially.
And it's not in the hooker district of town, like it was in Batman Year One, but it's in and around Gotham City Police Department, the GCPD.
Where he goes to meet Jim Gordon and have his first discussion with him. He tells him he's a good cop, unlike the rest of them, and gives him some information about Falcone. Jim
Gordon's still a bit dubious about what's being said here, because he kind of says, "You're just one man," and then Bruce Wayne / Batman says, "Now we're two," as he leaves, and Jim looks around, it's completely gone, and he's kind of like, he chases him down across the rooftops, pulls his revolver, and Batman kind of gets away by like jumping off the building and crashing down through the alley stairwell. But it is that idea that there's still this hint that he thinks who was that nut, who was that crazy guy.
Yeah.
But the link has been made now, and it's kind of, that extra bit of support, that part of the Batman team, which is Jim Gordon, has now kind of been like semi-recruited really into it. One of the other things that I just think is really important on the Batman, when finally the Batman suit is revealed after this scene, because it moves to where the Kevlar suit, this base jumping material, and obviously with the Batmobile, where this gets revealed to everyone before the first outing that we see of the Batsuit in Gotham. And it's just this really interesting thing, and it brings back to this fear concept running through the entire film. Alfred says, "Why bats, Master Wayne?" To which Bruce replies, "Bats frighten me. This time my enemies can share my dread." And this feeds so nicely into the next scene where Batman takes down Falcone.
Yeah, fantastic scene in the shipyards. So the information that Batman had provided to Jim Gordon was the connection between Jim and the drug ring that's going on. Both Detective Flass, Jim Gordon's partner, and Falcone are at the docks for the delivery of these two separate shipments of drugs in teddy bears, essentially, in teddy bears and teddy rabbits. Do you call them teddy rabbits? I'm never sure of that. But essentially, the rabbits are separated from the bears and sent to a different location, which is what you find out during this piece.
They're sent to the drug dealers, aren't they?
Yeah, both sent to different drug dealers, though. And what we essentially get is a scene directly out of Aliens, where Batman is taking off each of the bad guys, or the outlying members of the herd, I suppose, is what I got from it. He's driving all the villains, or all the goons, into one central location as he takes out all the people on the outside and terrifies them. You get little glimpses of the Batsuit all the way through this, and it's fantastic. I love this thing, absolutely loved it. he basically is using everything that he's learned from the League of Shadows.
Yeah, this idea of deception, or of fear, or of mystery, of surprise, all just this whole rabbit warren of containers, and taking out the lights, and adding fear to the people who he's trying to take down.
Yeah, and he essentially drives about 16 of them into one central part and then drops down the middle of them and takes every one of them out.
And you keep getting these flashbacks to the car, and again, it's just, Flash seems to be going, you might need to get out of here. It sounds as though something's going down because machine guns are firing. But Falcone is kind of like, just what the hell is that going on? Yeah. And you get that whole classic line where this image, this shadow is moving around on the peripheral, and one of the thugs is just like, where are you? And he turns slowly round, and there's upside down Batman going, here, and the cape just comes round, and you just hear this scream. It's brilliant.
It's fantastic. It's really good. Really good.
Falcone's there in his car, just like he's putting cartridges into his shotgun because he's like, I need to defend myself here. And then the next thing, he's just pulled through the sunroof of his limo, and it's like he's like shouting, "What the hell are you?" I'm Batman.
Yeah, perfect.
What the hell are you?
I'm Batman.
Brilliant. I mean, one of the things as well, we get a bit more exposition on the actual story that's going on. We kind of realize that Falcone, we kind of think at the beginning he is, he's the man about town. He's top of the pyramid, but you start to get made aware that he's obviously working for Crane, and there is this idea that Crane is working for someone else that we don't know, this unknown threat.
Yeah, we'd originally thought earlier on in the film, you think that it's the other way around. It's Crane working for Falcone, and in fact, it's Falcone working for Crane, who's working for a higher power. I just want to say there's one great little moment when the police arrive at the docks after this whole fight, and they show even the creation of the first bat signal is shown when it's actually Falcone strapped across a light, broadcasting the image into the sky, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, and Rachel Dawes is introduced for the first time to Batman as well at the monorail station, where she's about to get attacked by Falcone's thugs with the intent to kill her because Dr. Crane thinks that she's getting far too close. She's questioning him, this whole idea about Gotham seems to have this affinity with the insane, and she says the corrupt, and there's this idea that she knows something that Crane isn't on the level as a psychiatrist, and he's doing this for who we think is Falcone. And she's about to get mugged, and it's that whole turn away, and the Batman is taking her attackers down, and he says, here's leverage for you. I'm on your side. I'll help you out. I'm working to clean up Gotham like you.
A good little cinematic choice just before that in the monorail itself, which I think is really, whoever designed this probably one of the awesome set designers for this. But did you notice that the monorail is totally covered in graffiti? It's the windows are broken on it. It's a really dangerous location. Which, when you flash back to Thomas Wayne talking about the monorail, it was built so that the local people could travel around the city very cheaply, and it was built that way, and was owned by Wayne Enterprises essentially. It shows the kind of gap between the Wayne Enterprises as it is now versus the Wayne Enterprises as it was when Thomas Wayne set it up, and the difference between those two eras of Wayne Enterprises. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think basically we then have this really just iconic moment, which essentially brings an end to that second act and brings in the third. And it is as Nolan really loves to do, just these aerial shots. And in this case, he wasn't using IMAX, I don't think, at this stage. That was purely in The Dark Knight where he first started to introduce IMAX. But these aerial shots, and you have Batman stood on this ledge at the top of a skyscraper, looking down like one of the gargoyles that you would kind of expect in Gotham, looking down over his city, over what he is protecting. And it's as the camera aerial shot sort of pans round and he's silhouetted against the lights of the buildings and the city. It's just an iconic shot where the Batman has been born. He has been created, and we then move into this Act 3 where it is him being Batman, and you get this resolution to the story.
But before becoming Batman, he has to be taught how to be Bruce Wayne again. So essentially, Alfred gives him a bunch of lessons of how to be a billionaire playboy. He's covered in a bunch of bruises. He's waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and goes, what the heck am I supposed to do to cover all this up?
Yeah, but the flip side of the coin being you're well known, your family is well known, and you can't just hide in the shadow. You can't just be the Batman. You need the cover of Bruce Wayne, the billionaire. Yeah. And he's like, you need to be able to explain the bruises, which Alfred kind of says, maybe you should take up polo, which Bruce Wayne's like, polo? Like, really? And then, you also need this social life. And it kind of brings sort of one of the lighter moments of the whole film, the hotel scene where he's sat down having an evening meal. He's brought 2 girls along with him, and they start undressing, sort of getting into the hotel reception pool. Yeah. He's kind of like fobbing it off with, don't worry, they're from Europe, they're European. And then to make the headlines, to keep the cover of Bruce Wayne, I'm buying the hotel, and just kind of strutting his stuff, sort of throwing his weight around to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as he walks out with, firstly he climbs into the pool with the 2 European supermodels. But as he's leaving, soaking wet, he walks out the door, and no bit of levity in a Nolan film will be allowed to stand. So, of course, who's going into the restaurant? But Rachel, the one girl he's trying to impress with everything he's learned and show her that he's turned a new leaf and he's not the billionaire playboy, sees him in the worst possible moment of being the billionaire playboy.
Yeah, and you have this really touching moment, because you have to remember these are kind of lifelong friends. They are lifelong friends. And he says, this isn't what I am. He's trying to reach out to her. We've just had that scene on the monorail station, and she kind of turns to him, and again, it's this other kind of beat within the film about it's what you do that defines you. It's not who you are underneath. So it's like it's what you do that defines you. And again, it's one of these beats, with Thomas Wayne saying, "Why do we fall? So we learn to pick ourselves up." These points of wisdom that inform Bruce Wayne and Batman, whilst he is Batman, to how he trusts people, how he behaves, what his sort of moral center is, and again, it's that other beat to that moral center of Batman.
Absolutely. And then we start cracking into the closing, essentially, where we start setting up all the dominoes to fall. We have the scene with Falcone and Dr. Crane, and we finally see the Scarecrow, which I love.
It's great. Awesome. It's one to me. These are the best bits of visual effects, the computer generated effects of the film. Is the hallucinogen, this fear, with the Scarecrow, and it's really
stupidly Carmen Falcone is trying to bribe Dr. Crane by saying, "I know the experiments. I've seen everything you've done to those inmates. I know you're not just a psychiatrist." He's like, "Oh, I use this mask on my inmates," and then gasses him and turns him insane.
But you have this great sort of little bit of dialogue between the two of them before, where it's like, Falcone is kind of just like, he's just hunched over the desk as Dr. Crane comes in, and he's like, I can't take it anymore, Doctor. I can't even do a sort of a New York accent, so I won't even try.
Oh, go on, I tried a bunch.
Hey, I can't take it anymore. Blah, 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 blah. And he's just kind of doing that thing, and it's just so funny. And he kind of says, if I eat any more of the food in here, I probably will go insane. And sort of Dr. Crane isn't finding this at all funny. And Falcone just thinks he's going to just get a doctor's note almost to get him out of here.
Exactly.
And in a sinister kind of way, Dr. Crane just turns around and says, let me show you my mask. And he pulls out the Scarecrow mask and then gasses him.
And drives him insane and sends him to Arkham Asylum, so, which is essentially one of our central points for the rest of the film. So what we found out is that the 2 sets of drug shipments, one is sent to the Narrows, one is sent to the other drug dealers. So this is all where everything's starting to build up. We find out that that there's a piece of Wayne tech that's been that is a water destroyer, essentially designed for desert combat, which will destroy the opposing army's water supply. Not too sure about that one. We'll talk about that one a bit later on. But it's a pretty interesting piece of tech. But essentially, the DA, who's Rachel Dawes' boss, finds this piece of Wayne tech on the docks in Gotham and gets murdered for it, setting up a future DA, which we'll talk about in a future film.
You have the interrogation of Flass by the Batman in relation to the shipment as well, and you get again some classic dialogue from the film where he gets pulled up by his ankle up about 10 stories from the alleyway, and Batman's interrogating him. Flass is kind of panicked and he's like, I swear to God, I'm telling you the truth. I swear to God. And just Batman just like growls back at him. It's like, swear to me. Yes. And it's like, oh yeah, like it's real brutal, elemental kind of stuff. And that idea again of the fear of Batman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely thinking there's a lot of pieces in here that are coming from Gore's script, as well as, just I'd say working with Nolan probably drove a lot of this stuff. But we get a little quip from Scarecrow as Batman goes and finds his lair, where he's trying to destroy all the evidence of the shipment of this fear. Let's call it the fear gas now. We can do that. People have seen the film, so where he's storing all this stuff and where all the rabbits have been delivered. Essentially, Batman finds him here. When Scarecrow meets Batman face to face for the first time, he tells him, "You look like a man that takes himself too seriously. In my opinion, you need to lighten up." Just after spraying him with fear gas and setting him on fire. So, a real comic book moment there.
Yeah, and again, you have those great visuals where the bats start coming out of the Scarecrow's mouth. These quick cuts to Bruce's psychosis about the bats from his childhood. Really good.
Yeah, and what I love about this, we mentioned it before, it's about the team that's around Batman as well. Absolutely, without the help of Alfred, Batman would not have escaped from being set on fire. He crawls and climbs his way up the building into being the fire put out by the rain on the roof, but he just about calls Alfred and gets Alfred to come and pick him up and take him home, essentially, after this first battle with the Scarecrow.
And just a quick point of reference in the film is that whilst Batman is in the Narrows, where he's just been interrogating Flass, and where he goes to find where Scarecrow is hiding some of these shipments that are coming into the Narrows, we do get a glimpse of the future King Joffrey. It's one of those kind of moments where the film has just brought back, to say, well, kids can enjoy this, and you get to see, I think, is it Jack Gleason, who becomes the future King Joffrey.
Yes, and the future of 1 billion internet memes telling them if only Batman had thrown him off the top of the building, we would never had a King Joffrey, which I think is horrible. But yeah,
it's very horrible. But what he did to Sansa.
Spoilers. Spoilers for another series.
I mean, then we also kind of find out that it's Bruce's birthday. And we learn about this whilst Bruce is recovering from the effects of this hallucinogen drug that Scarecrow has sprayed him with. And luckily, he's been out for 2 days. Lucius Fox has managed to synthesize an antidote to get him out of that slumber and to prevent the true effects of this fear, this panic drug taking hold of him and essentially crushing his mind. I mean, there is this theme as well of the strength of the mind over the body from the power of this hallucinogen. It then cuts back to Rachel going to Arkham because Falcone's had his breakdown. Rachel just thinks this is another ploy by Crane to get Falcone off the hook. She doesn't realise sort of the deeper things that are going on in the background here. She just thinks it's Crane being corrupt, trying to get off Falcone.
And like she's always recommended to Bruce, she goes off alone to take on, showing absolutely no fear. She goes on to take on Dr. Crane at Arkham Asylum. Obviously doesn't know what we'd know. I wouldn't go anywhere near that place, to be honest. But yeah, once she gets there, she's essentially attacked by Crane and given a concentrated dose of the fear gas.
Yeah, and but she has been followed by Batman here, and so the Batman arrives, and there's the great line then from the Scarecrow where one of his thugs turns around to him and says, "Well, what should we do?" And he's like, what you should always do, call the police. And this kind of leads into something that's so reminiscent. It's at Arkham Asylum rather than an empty sort of abandoned house, but it's straight out of Batman Year One, with the exception of it being sort of firebombed by the police, which I thought at the time in Batman Year One that was hilarious.
Bit of overkill, yeah.
Bit of overkill. Batman essentially gets Rachel Dawes out, but saves himself from being arrested by, again, summoning all the bats with his little sonic device that calls them to him to allow him to escape from the SWAT team that's kind of closing in around him.
But not before driving Jonathan Crane insane with his own fear gas, which I love.
Yeah, exactly.
It gives him a proper overdose of it, and from then on, he is Scarecrow. He is no longer Dr. Jonathan Crane.
You get the great line is like, Dr. Crane isn't here right now, but if you'd like to make an appointment, and it's just a great bit of comedy, as he's kind of having this psychotic turn that, you get the answer machine message. It's really, really, really funny. But also from this, there is sudden realization to Batman. He is told that who is putting this in the water, but he learns that it's Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah. So
that's the big thing that the Scarecrow gives away.
Yeah. So Ra's al Ghul is not dead, or has he returned to life?
Yeah, exactly. With the Lazarus Pit.
Possibly. Yeah. So we get our biggest action sequence after this. Really, this is the drive through the city. A really realistic action sequence, apparently, with the tumbler driving through the city. It's obviously the way that Nolan likes to do things. It's shot from above, from many angles, and is generally quite a shot as it happens.
Yeah, a lot of models used as well. Certainly some of the underground sequences that are done. And you have the police describing it as a black tank. Jim Gordon's, I've got to get myself one of those. Sure, we would all love to have the Batmobile.
Absolutely.
And it's all to get Rachel back to the Batcave to give her the antidote because she's received a concentrated version of the fear toxin that Scarecrow has been using, and before her brains kind of like melt out of her ears, that Batman needs to save her. But I do love the fact that all the visual effects of like sort of Batman oozing sort of oil out of his mouth, and the Scarecrow with bats coming out of his mouth, and all these sort of pulsing environments and doorways when people have been exposed to this fear toxin. Ultimately, I mean, it's something that makes me laugh all the time that Rachel has just had a concentrated dose. She's sat next to the Batman in a big vehicle that is crashing through things and blowing things up. And in fairness, I think, she plays it. Katie Holmes plays it really well in some of her looks that she does, where it's like she's just freaking out. That I'm surprised her brain just didn't explode with the fear toxin.
Yeah,
It's
because
really
honestly, if I was in the Batmobile driving at that speed, I would be freaking out completely. All this chase scene kind of ends with a bit of a Simpsons moment where Batman turns off the light in his car and it seems to disappear from view out the window of 200 cop cars that are traveling and the helicopter that's flying above him. It's a little bit much to believe, but hey, we've gone almost 2 hours into the film without a complete moment of disbelief. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that is one of the oddest moments, or maybe the most convenient moments of the film.
How do we end this? How do we end this scene where
turn
we're
out
being
the lights.
We'll turn off the lights. Yeah. It's fantastic.
So Batman brings Rachel back to the Batcave, and he gives her the antidote that Lucius had given him previously, and then essentially sedates her and sends her back, but with the instructions that you're going to wake up at your own house, and you need to go and get these antidotes to Jim Gordon.
As Bruce goes off to enjoy his 30th birthday party with a bunch of hangers-on, as he likes to call them.
Yeah, or Two-Face friends as well, which is the interesting sort of reference to Harvey Dent, Two-Face.
Yeah.
At this birthday party, we essentially are getting the big reveal that Ra's al Ghul is not dead. Bruce Wayne is introduced by one of the people at the party. Have you met this lovely chap, this nice guy called...
What's the name? Is it Ra's?
Yeah, Ra's al Ghul. And it's not anyone who we've seen before. And then behind him is Ducard, who we see Batman save at the monastery, and there is this sort of reveal that it is Ducard hiding, maybe in plain sight, that was Ra's al Ghul, that he is this timeless person who hides in plain sight.
Yeah, so in the comic books, which we haven't really talked about much, but Ra's is an immortal character who can bring himself back to life by using the Lazarus pits. In this film, it's obviously immortality would be something that Christopher Nolan would shy away from as a storyline, but he does bring the question up and answers it as, is Ra's al Ghul immortal? Are his methods supernatural, or are they just cheap parlor tricks, which is all the parlor tricks that he's taught Bruce through the League of Shadows. Thought that was a really good idea.
Yeah, but we get this really interesting exchange between the two of them, where Ra's al Ghul is essentially saying, watch Gotham tear itself apart through fear, and it comes back to this fear element. You begin to hear that the League of Shadows has been this check on society, and for the League of Shadows, Gotham has become bloated, corrupt. It's grown too big for its boots. It's become decadent, and it needs to have the brakes put on that. And he talks about the sack of Rome, the plague, and the fire of London as being times in history where the League of Shadows have acted to put that brake on society.
Yeah, and they say that they've tried to take down Gotham before by introducing economics as a way of taking it down, but because of people like Thomas and Martha Wayne, who stood up by using their money to influence the rest of the society to bring Gotham through the terrible time. And now this time they're going to use the fear gas and fire and fear to take down Gotham for once and for all, because the economics didn't work last time.
Yeah, and he says a really interesting line which says, "No idealists will get in the way this time." It's kind of almost the suggestion that and I don't know, it's not confirmed, but were they involved in the killing of Thomas and Martha Wayne? Because they did disrupt their plans through economics by building the monorail and so on. So there is that suggestion there is that hint that could be a possibility. And then we get the sacking of essentially Wayne Manor, and Ducard, or Ra's al Ghul now, says, "You burnt my house and left me for dead. Consider the favour returned." Bruce Wayne is essentially sort of trapped by a bit of falling masonry.
Yeah, and Alfred saves him for a second time. Again, this crew that's around Bruce, the people that he surrounded him with, he wouldn't be able to get through the situations that he gets through without all of these people. Everybody thinks of Batman as a real loner. He thinks of himself as a real loner. But once again, if it wasn't for having Alfred around, he wouldn't be able to get out of it.
Yeah, and then they race to the Batcave where you actually find out, and you've seen it previously, where it's the 3 chords on the piano that open up the bookcase down into the Batcave, and that's certainly a reference to Batman 66.
It's directly out of Batman 66. Yeah, there's a really good story, and I'll interrupt this whole sequence now quickly, but a really good story of Nolan and David Goyer when they were writing the script together, that they used to go down to the original Batcave from the 60s TV series, which is just underneath the Hollywood sign in LA. They used to go down there to just kind of inspire themselves. So they obviously were huge fans of the 66 Batman series and incorporated that element into even this darkest version of Batman. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they go down so that he can put on the Batsuit, because at this moment then, like, Arkham is kind of going crazy and chaos is ensuing. You've got the prisoners being released from Arkham Asylum with Victor Zsasz and the Scarecrow being released. You have that jump to Ra's now, Ra's al Ghul in the Narrows, and he's kind of saying time to spread the word, and the word is panic. And this idea that everything is going to chaos, as now the revelation that all these shipments coming in that Dr. Crane was putting into the drinking water of Arkham, testing it on the inmates of Arkham, and that the microwave emitter that was stolen from Wayne Enterprises all come together in this plan where it's going to vaporize the water in the mains water supply in the Narrows and across Gotham City to release this fear toxin that we have been seeing from the very start
right back to the blue
into
flare
the
at
atmosphere,
yeah.
and release it to cause panic and to cause just sort of mental breakdown among the population of Gotham. And it's quite interesting that actually the previous Ra's al Ghul by Ken Watanabe, he essentially, right in the first act, lays bare the exact plan, the exact story that is set to follow in Batman Begins. It's kind of hidden, like Ra's al Ghul, in plain sight. And that is a really interesting little touch to the story here. Now, I think one of the criticisms of vaporizing the water supply is that as human beings, we're obviously 80% water, that maybe we would get vaporized, or our eyes would explode in their sockets. I
think it would be like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where they just turn into dust. Essentially, that's basically what would happen if all the water was vaporized around the area.
Yeah. So I think
but they've obviously worked on the project for a long time. So
yeah. So well, I think we can. I think we can push that under the carpet with heightened environment.
Yes.
That type of thing. But, it is one of the criticisms of the plot, and I think we need to sort of at least acknowledge that as beings made up of 80% water with a microwave emitter that is supposedly going to do this, be in the vicinity. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we just have to go for suspended disbelief. I think that's about as far as I can give it.
And one of the interesting things is, one of the criticisms, again, of Batman Begins, not only this plot point, but I think you can forgive it for being also a graphic novel, comic book movie. These things happen, but people said that it took itself too seriously. Well, obviously not.
I do think the reference earlier on of Dr. Crane saying to Batman that he looks like someone that takes himself too seriously. Why doesn't he lighten up? I think that is a reference of Nolan knowing that he's taking himself very, very seriously and enjoying taking himself very seriously.
And he's fully aware of that, absolutely. And actually, this whole element descends into... It's kind of quite gruesome, actually. You get to see a bit of cannibalism. There's a hint of zombieism going on with the fear toxin. You see Detective Flass, where he's like half skeleton. His sort of this his bones showing through his face.
Yeah.
Kids with sort of glazed over white eyes, as this fear toxin spreads through the Narrows, and then you see someone sort of biting the ear or the neck off someone in sort of almost like a cannibalistic type of ritual. I mean, very brief moments, but you know, it's little touches to this descent into being quite gruesome.
There's also another great zombie scene. I think it's absolutely taken from some of Romero's type of zombie scenes, where the residents of the Narrows, including some cops that are on the island, all form around Batman, and it's like as if he's being taken apart by the zombie horde. He uses his bat shot to take him out, his bat gun to take him out. Grapple gun, that's the one. Uses his grapple gun to take him out of there, attaches himself to the monorail, and off he goes to save the day.
And you have this great, again, it's the fear effect that is employed throughout this movie. I mean, I've probably gone on about it far too long, but I mean, you have the horse breathing fire with Crane on it, and there's a great point where he's trying to kill Rachel Dawes. She's defending King Joffrey.
So that's why nobody likes Rachel Dawes, is it?
Yeah, maybe. And she just tasers, sends out a taser to the face, and Crane disappears. That's the last.
The screaming Dr. Crane rides off into the distance.
We see him, but you have this lovely image of the bat flying over people whilst he's on the grapple gun, and his eyes are lit up red. He's breathing fire. Just this personification of fear. And as this train is heading to Wayne Towers, and Batman's there to try and stop Ra's al Ghul from essentially sending the train with the microwave emitter to Wayne Towers, which seems to be the hub of everything. Not only is it a central light railway station, but it also seems to,
and the center of industry. It's also the center of the power grid and water supply.
And the water supply. So I mean, this is like all the eggs in one basket. Take out Wayne Towers and where Wayne Enterprises is, and that's it.
I don't think there'd be many city planners that would actually agree to that. Do you think?
So he's out there to stop Ra's al Ghul.
They have their final battle on the monorail, obviously, on the way to the hub, and it's up to Jim Gordon in the Batmobile to save the day as well. So once again, not Batman doesn't do it on his own. It's Jim Gordon that helps him out.
Yeah, he's trying to blow up one of the towers that holds up this sort of suspended train line.
Meanwhile, on the train, Bruce is fighting with Raz, beating him up, but Raz doesn't understand the plan. Raz thinks that he's going to be able to, that Bruce is trying to fight him and kill him and beat him.
He thinks he's trying to actually stop the train as well.
Yeah, but so he destroys the controls of it. The whole plan is not revealed to Raz until Bruce turns to him and says, "I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to become that man. But I don't have to save you." And this is another kind of point that a lot of people criticize. Batman's not a killer. In general, in the comics, he gets people arrested and puts them in Arkham. That's kind of the thing. So one of the pieces here is, so he's not going to kill him, but he's going to let him die. It's kind of the same thing to a lot of people.
Definitely, it's the same thing to a lot of people, but the technicality of, are you worth saving? It's that idea that injustice is everywhere. It's not just simply these huge injustices on the people of Gotham. It's those smaller things. And I think here, it's the same kind of thing. It's
it's a bit more grey.
It's grayer, but I don't have to save you. This is your making. You can escape this, and I'm not going to take you with me.
Yeah.
You can still leave, escape, but if you don't, you might, and probably will, die.
Yeah, since you give him about 10 seconds to escape, it's probably the latter. But if he planned better...
Yeah, the train crashes and blows up. The microwave emitter kind of blows up the entire train and so on, and the water stops vaporizing. Gotham is saved from this danger, and one of the things that kind of we'd spotted is then sort of Jim Gordon is looking up as sort of Batman flies overhead after escaping from the train, and sort of right behind him is just Wayne
Uh-huh.
of the Wayne Enterprise on the building as he flies overhead, sort of a big guess who it is, like a little nod.
It's like, hello, Jim. Hello, Jim. And spoilers for the rest of the series, but Jim doesn't actually know that Batman is Bruce Wayne forever. Like, he essentially is the only person kept in the dark, despite that huge thing went up there for him. But hey, that's the first notice. But yeah, and just it kind of goes into wrap up from there. Really, there's some good little beats, I suppose, at the end that set up the rest of this film series. But I mentioned at the start that this movie was originally set to set up a prequel to Batman, the Tim Burton film. So a lot of these kind of final beats are just in case this film doesn't work, we're going to actually lead into Tim Burton's Batman, right? So they set up the fact that Bruce is going to take over Wayne Enterprises again. So he buys it up through a lot of stocks and shares, some stuff that's
and you get that kind of nice sort of cathartic moment where Mr. Earl essentially gets fired by Lucius Fox, and the reason why that has so much resonance is because previous to that, Lucius Fox has been fired whilst he's been trying to make this antidote, has been fired by Mr. Earl, but he doesn't know, he's completely in the dark that Bruce Wayne has done this, and he kind of gets to eat a bit of humble pie here.
Yeah.
And it's again, one for the regular, the good corporate businessman, I suppose.
Exactly. And then you have Bruce standing in the ruins of Wayne Manor, saying that he's going to rebuild it as it was before, brick by brick. While he's discussing with Alfred, and Alfred makes the point, well, maybe we could improve the structure of the foundations over near the area where the Batcave is, which is great.
And there's the bittersweet moment a bit, really, with Rachel. In the Narrows, he saves her from Crane on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
He re-utters the line that she did at the hotel, where she goes, it's what you do, it's not about what's underneath the sort of the front or the persona. And she says, the mask is Bruce Wayne, and the real face is Batman. It is, again, coming to this notion of who is the other person in this. You know, It is the argument that it's normally Batman, but the argument is said that it's Bruce Wayne. And, you know, she kind of...
It's similar to the argument they always say about Superman, that the mask that he wears is Clark Kent, it's not Superman.
Yeah. And that... So maybe when Gotham no longer needs Batman, and that certainly plays out then in the next film, when there's no longer the need for the Dark Knight, when there is maybe a White Knight available, then that he, Bruce Wayne, will return, as he never so far has come back from the travels that he did abroad to the Himalayas. And that's a bit of a bittersweet moment, because I think there is this element that Bruce Wayne is looking, he's kind of told her the truth, and he thinks that this will be enough for her to kind of reconnect with him, and for them to maybe explore their feelings for one another that they had growing up. And this, to me, is just a real sort of bittersweet kind of type of moment at the end of the film.
Absolutely, but again, it's one of the things that probably allows it to connect into the Batman film is that it's showing that Bruce can't have a wife or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's simply setting up that, yes, Rachel is his friend from childhood, yes, the two of them have feelings for each other, but they can't be together.
Batman is so big.
Rachel knows that.
Yeah. Batman is so big now to Bruce Wayne, and that the persona of who is who almost is blurred and gets lost.
Absolutely. And then we have our final credits tag, essentially, which is something that Marvel have been doing in the middle of their trailers for years after this film. But they decided to do a pre-credits tag or the end of the film, as it used to be known, where Jim Gordon calls on Batman one last time by using his brand new bat symbol modeled on Falcone across a spotlight. He says to Batman, "Well, I couldn't find a criminal to strap onto it. I've built this from scratch," which is a good little moment.
And he kind of talks about escalation, and he says, you know, if we were bulletproof jackets, they
use armor-piercing bullets. Yeah.
And he says, "What about escalation? You put on the mask. What will other people do?" And from that, he goes, "Take this guy. He has the taste for the theatrical," sort of referencing the fact that the only reason he's doing this is because of the theatricality that Batman, in a sense, has brought to crime fighting and Gotham. And he obviously pulls out in an evidence bag a Joker card.
Yeah. Definitely left, when I remember seeing this in the cinema, that left me with the moment of, when's the next one coming out? I know exactly when. I really want to see this. I know what's coming and can't wait. And it's one of the points I want to make about this is, even in Nolan's films, this is a pre-existing villain. Joker is a villain that is existing in Gotham at the time, and it's only now that Jim Gordon goes, well, maybe I should bring this to Batman, essentially. Maybe I could get his help on this. So once again, another character that exists in the universe and maybe will be in the Gotham TV show, but has existed in Gotham, had his own life up to that point, and only now is he starting to become a bad villain or a bad guy for Batman.
For me, I think in terms of restarting the franchise, Nolan really does a great job. I think we can maybe now look back at it, or people will sort of do a retake on it and say, well, maybe it is a bit too dark and a bit too moody and a bit too intense and maybe a bit too serious or full of itself. I don't personally buy that, because I think ultimately you have to realise where it came from, and it came from neon 8-year-olds being involved in the script and people talking about the nipples on the Batsuit more than the story. And I mean, if nothing else, maybe, no film is perfect, but this film reconnects it to one of the best graphic novels, which is Batman Year One. I mean, there are so many Frank Miller references from Year One taken from this film, as well as great acting. I mean, Christian Bale does a absolute great job of being Bruce Wayne. Alfred as this emotional center as well to Bruce Wayne is really good. Liam Neeson, Cillian Murphy as the two bad guys is amazing. And I mean, you have that something to say in relation to sort of the number. People say you can't introduce a lot of bad guys or a lot of characters to a film. Over to you, Derek.
Well, absolutely. A couple of pieces of feedback that we read at the beginning of this relatively long episode. A couple of the pieces of feedback were already saying, how the heck can they introduce this many characters into the TV series? How can they introduce this many characters into a 13-episode or 16-episode or possibly 22-episode TV series? That's 22 hours worth of shows potentially, where they can explore these characters in much greater detail than Nolan did. But what Nolan introduced was Victor Zsasz, Carmen Falcone, Ra's al Ghul, Ducard, who's the hand-man of Ra's al Ghul.
Ra's al Ghul Mark II.
Yeah. He introduced
Jonathan
Scarecrow and Jonathan Crane. He introduced Detective Flass as another bad guy. That's all the bad guys. And then also the whole syndicate of characters that surround the Batman.
Lucius Fox, Rachel Dawes, obviously there's Alfred, there's Mr. Earl.
Yeah.
All these different things.
Absolutely. There's so many elements and so many characters in here. And if you don't believe that a TV series can introduce all of these characters and do it well, I beg to differ. Go watch Batman Begins and see how it was done by a great director and by a really good writer. Don't get me wrong, but I'm really hopeful going into the series.
Yeah, and there are some really iconic moments in this film, and to me, these are the main beats in the film, where you have the swirling bats. First, it's at the start. It's where Bruce Wayne finds and breathes in the Batcave and becomes Batman, or gets the idea to become Batman. And then finally, when he is becoming the Batman and he's there
like a gargoyle watching over his city, and then he goes and protects them from the threat of the League of Shadows. Some really iconic moments, and some things that I think Nolan just builds on and gets better at doing those types of shots in The Dark Knight particularly. I mean, for me, obviously, this is definitely a recommend. I mean, I would say it's a 3.5 to 4 sheriff stars or batarangs or detective badges. And we would recommend. I mean, I suppose not many people who are listening to the podcast will have maybe not seen this movie, but I mean, I would recommend, if there are people who haven't watched the movie, watch it and just see how, appreciate the context that it was made in, that it was coming off some really awful Batman films, which, I mean, quite honestly, you know, okay, I can look back at them now and laugh, but I kind of was like, you know, draw on the floor, going, what have they done to this character? I mean, it was even worse. I mean, you know, people complain about Batman 66, but I mean, that still was kind of, it was serious. This outright just sort of just trashed the property, I think, to an extent. And I'm sure there'll be a point where we have to review them, and it might be jokey.
I was actually going to say that we're going to have to go back and review pretty much every film that has any of the characters that are going to be in the TV show. We know that there are some characters that are coming up in the TV show that are in those films. So
there's part of me that has a soft...
So don't destroy them.
No,
yes,
no, I'm not going to destroy them.
We'll talk about them in the future.
Part of me has a soft spot for the Riddler, for example.
Of course.
Jim Carrey. So
maybe not.
But for me, it's definitely 3.5 to 4 sort of sheriff stars.
I'm surprised you've gone as low as you have on that, but yeah.
No, because I think placing that in the context of what I know to come next and what I know is the third film, and I think I'd say 3.5 or 4.
You get 3.75.
Yeah, 3.75. It is a total recommend for me. It's someone as well who is building their craft, and so it's a recommend. Definitely go and watch it if you haven't already.
Yeah, I'm certain you have, because we told you to, and if you didn't, and you skip to the end here where we gave you a rating, then go back and watch it and go back and listen to what we said. I hope we haven't just had a discussion about this. I hope you guys felt that there was a bunch of information that we provided to you, and stuff about our opinions about it. I absolutely love Batman Begins. Really, really enjoyed. I've watched it many, many times at this stage. There are some little drags in the middle of it. Actually, mostly within the first act. Actually, I find it drags a little bit, but I agree with John. It's not the best of the franchise, but it's definitely a great setup and something far better than what Joel Schumacher accomplished during his time at the helm of the Bat franchise.
Yeah, I mean, there is also, just quickly as well, there is an argument to say that the third act is jam-packed with a lot of stuff going on, and so it can feel rushed, even though it is the longest act that we've identified out of
time-wise, it is the longest act without a doubt.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot going on, but there's definitely a lot going on in every single act, and that's why it's so difficult to cover this movie in a short period of time. I think there's so much to talk about with it.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed our podcast. We hope as well that maybe it gets you to go out and watch this film again and enjoy it for a second or third or fourth or fifth time. Or 20th, exactly. So, I mean, for me, I'd really like to say thank you guys for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. Again, any feedback that you want to provide on this show, on any of the comments we've made, any thoughts that you have that maybe you want to add that we may have missed or not maybe developed as much as you would have liked, please get in contact. Connect with us on Facebook, on Google+, or on Twitter.
Yep, we'll be covering the Nolan Batman movies for the next 2 episodes. So get in contact with us on Gotham TV Podcast at gmail.com. You can also call us on Skype. We have our Skype account up there. Again, it's Gotham TV Podcast. But yeah, keep in contact with us. We're loving your feedback. So
and you can leave comments on the website as well at gothamtvpodcast.com. Please feel free to do so. Thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bruce, deep down you may still be that same great kid you used to be. But it's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you.
I'm Batman.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, certainly. So, starring Christian Bale as Batman, Batman Begins charts the origin of Batman.
Blah, blah, blah.
Great kind of reference, can you ride stick? It's obviously not an automatic.
Blah, blah, blah.
Lucius Fox in the comics came in the 70s, but it was used occasionally.
Played by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Ding.
Yeah, the wonderful Morgan Freeman. And finally answers the question of... I know what John's alluding to, and I'm not going to mention it.
Can you guess what?
So Lucius Fox finally answers the question posed by the Riddler.
Blah, blah, blah.